Okay guys, we're back. This is part 2 of our Level Up Pistol series. So I'll say right now, if you missed part 1, it'll be linked below. Go back and check that out. It'll make a lot more sense, I think, if you watch these in order. But this is from day 2 of our Level Up Pistol class. And this is going to really cover a lot of movement stuff, both shooting on the move as well as entries and exits. And then kind of a deep dive on stage planning and just general application of performance shooting skills. Hope you enjoy.
So ringing in for just a minute, we'll talk through a couple things. So we started off yesterday, obviously with a very, very brief intro into kind of developing a stage plan and so forth. We are going to fill out this checklist over the course of the day as we add some layers to kind of put together what I would call 7-step stage planning. I basically have like a 7-step checklist that I like to go through when developing a plan to give me a system to try to find what is the most efficient way to solve this problem. I'll say a couple things about stage planning off the bat. Number one, I used to kind of say that, hey, this is kind of like the one thing part of the class that really like only applies to, the gamer side of the house. I've kind of changed some thinking on that. Obviously, in more tactical or defensive shooting, there's certainly situations where you have to, you can have an opportunity to develop a plan and then you have to execute it and so forth. But more importantly, I kind of think that a lot of the skills that are involved in this are really, really important for anybody who wants to be a good performance shooter, whether it's in the context of competition or not. We talked yesterday about how, hey, what this is really testing is not only your understanding of how to, utilize certain shooting techniques to efficiently solve a problem, but also it requires a good self-assessment of your skills to know, hey, what are my capabilities? What can I actually do on demand? Do I have a process that allows me to execute not only at a high level of my capability, but with consistency? And that consistency is huge. Imagine, for example, again, you're not a competitor, but you're trying to figure out, hey, I've got an array of 15-yard open targets or whatever. Is it better for me to shoot these on the move? Or am I better off, maybe I'd have to go to 2 or 3 different positions and shoot, multiple targets standing still, or I could try to stay shooting on the move the whole time. What's better for me? And well, how are you going to tell that? Well, you have to test it on the clock and see, right? So you do it the first way, right? You should do it shooting on the move. It's like, okay, well, that was 10 seconds. And then you do like the multiple position static one. And that one's 9 seconds. And you're like, okay, well, actually not shooting on the move looks like it's faster. Well, let me double check it. Let me do it again and see if I get like the same results. Right? You do it again. This time shooting on the move is like 8 seconds. And the not shooting on the move is like 11 seconds. You're like, well, what's going on? you can't even tell which one's better because you don't actually have the ability to plan out, here's exactly how I want to run this, and then execute it exactly according to plan. And if you can't really do that, well, then how are you supposed to know like what skills or techniques actually work better for you or not? So I think this is a really good skill set to have. Again, for anybody who wants to be kind of a good high-level performance shooter. What is the goal, do you guys think, of a good stage plan? What are we trying to accomplish primarily?
Fluidity, efficiency.
Efficiency? What does that mean?
I'd say getting into your positions to shoot with as little time in between as possible.
Okay.
It's like what you were saying yesterday. It's
well,
like
extra steps or extra movement as far as bracing to take off or
sure.
position.
Sure.
Being ready to move to the next spot.
Okay.
Setting yourself up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of started talking about this concept yesterday morning, right? Where the idea was, hey, the most efficient way to run this stage, right? Really a big focus for us is to minimize our time spent not shooting, right? To spend stay shooting as much as we can with the fewest amount of gaps. So like the kind of mission statement that I have for stage planning is just very simply spend the least amount of time not shooting possible. That's the whole idea. You could say start shooting as soon as possible, stay shooting as much as possible, like whatever articulation makes most sense for you. We're trying to stay shooting the whole time is kind of the concept, and minimize any time where the clock is running and no shooting is happening. Again, we're using hit factor scoring, which is determining how many points per second are you scoring, right? So if you've got a break between positions where it takes you 3 seconds to get from position A to position B and there's no targets you're shooting on the way, that's 3 seconds of 0 hit factor. Right? 0 points being scored, which of course is going to wreck your score, or at least drag that hit factor down significantly. So if we have the opportunity to stay shooting the whole time, that's kind of what we want to do. As we start looking at this and trying to figure out what is the plan that allows us to stay shooting the most and stop shooting the least, essentially, first thing we're going to figure out, we talked about yesterday, right? Step one, where are the targets, right? And we talked about that we want to consult the round count for this. as we go through, because again, there's a couple things you might find. You might find that you're missing a target somewhere. Happens regularly. There's no reason for that really to ever happen to you if you are using that round count as a part of your walkthrough, or you might find you're looking at a target from more than one position. There's definitely opportunities to do that here on this stage today. So you want to make sure you're obviously only shooting a target from one place. No reason to shoot it from more than one place. Only your best 2 hits are going to score. So if you shoot it total of 4 times, 2 different positions, you're just wasting, obviously, that time and ammo. It might cause you to do an extra reload you didn't account for, whatever the case may be, right? So we want to make sure we know where the targets are and consult that round count. Next, I'm going to figure out, now that I know where the targets are, what are my forced shooting positions? What are the positions on the stage that I have to go to, right? Usually because a certain target is only available from here. Therefore, I have to go to it. Obviously, on the stage, there's going to be a lot of targets that are available from sort of all over the place, right? Like huge swaths, and I can pick where I want to shoot the target from. But there's very commonly going to be targets that are kind of only available from one spot, and that's going to tell me where are the places on the stage that I have to go to. That's the first thing we're going to figure out. We'll talk about what that kind of means and how to look at it. Take a minute, though. Walk the stage. Should be 14 paper and 2 steel, I believe, on this stage. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what we set up. 14 paper and 2 steel. Make sure you know where all the targets are, and tell me what are the forced shooting positions on this stage you have to go to. And 14 paper and 2 steel. Okay. What are the forced positions on the stage? Where are the places that I have to go to? Okay. Now, you may notice on the checklist, under forced shooting positions, we have written zones. You'll see a couple places where this kind of matters. It's often very tempting to think of the 4 shooting positions as sort of X marks the spot. In other words, you're going to come over here and be like, well, I can see the target from here, so I've got to go, right here. It's like, no, not really. Almost always your 4 positions are kind of zoned. In other words, why do I have to go here? Well, the wall is kind of blocking it. So, we got, 6-yard open target. How much of the target do I need to see to shoot it? The whole thing? Not so much. I really just need the A zone, someone said, even if you even need the whole thing. But let's look at it. I'm going to look kind of down the edge of the wall, right? Where I look down the edge of this no shoot at sort of the edge of the A zone. And I'm going to kind of draw a line where that A zone is basically available from. So, what I'm basically saying here is like, hey, I don't actually have to go all the way up here. If it's more beneficial to shoot it from towards the back, or I'm closer to the center or whatever, there's this zone I have to get across to be able to shoot that target. Now, what has to get across that line? Both feet? Not even. What has to get across that line to shoot the target? The gun and my firing eye. That's it. Right? So as an example, even though my zone is here, can I shoot the target from here? 100%. Yes. But my gun and my eye really realistically needs to get across that line in some way. Right? Where else do I have to go to? Okay, over here. Right? And again, it's going to be kind of a zone. We've got kind of the target tight against the wall here. I'm going to kind of draw a line. Again, you don't have to go all the way in the corner. You kind of have to get across that line, basically. Don't judge my artwork too hard, but basically across that line, shoot that target. Where else? Okay, maybe one of the most specific, like the closest to X marks the spot. If I really do want the whole A zone on the target way behind the wall, I kind of got to get, basically fully in that corner to have full exposure on that A zone. Where else? Where?
Right there, where that blue mark is at.
Okay, so, again, great example, X marks the spot thinking, right? In other words, okay, so I got to get across this line, but that line goes all the way back there. Basically, that target's available from like half the stage. So, again, I don't want to trap myself. I want to be aware. Try not to block the whole camera if you can, brother. You're good, man. Sorry, I'm trying to feed the gram over here, okay? But again, so I just want, and I'm not saying like I may come right here to that target. Yes, like that's the easiest place to get a target from. But do I want to be aware of the fact that, hey, if like the only reason I have to come up to the front of the stage is for that target, could I shoot it from back there? 100%. Right. So again, I'll kind of think about it like, hey, there's a zone here that kind of goes back like this. Any other kind of restricted positions I got to go to? Okay, steel. Okay, again, this is where like thinking about it could really pay off. Super tempting to think about, hey, I'm going to have to come right here to shoot the steel. What's the tricky part with that? Well, this is a definite sort of like risk factor on the stage in the sense of like, okay, how am I going to get to this position? Most likely I'm going to be kind of like working across the front in one direction or another, right? Let's imagine I'm coming from this side. I'm coming in this way. The only targets that are available to me are these two. So maybe I'm shooting in on those two. How easy is it going to be to do something like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, oh crap, ding, and I have to come back for it, right? To overrun this kind of very tight position where that steel's available from. And if I do that, how much time is that going to cost me? Quite a bit, right? Let's say I'm worried about that. Well, I'm going to say, okay, well, where actually is the target fully available from? And realistically, again, it's a zone. I'm going to draw some lines that go back, you know, kind of all the way, something like that. To where, by the way? The start position. So, what I want to at least be aware of, hey man, I could just start standing in the start position, staring at that steel. And if I wanted to get it out of the way, I could just step in and go ding and now leave and do whatever I'm going to do next. Yeah, that's a great option to at least be aware of. Am I saying that's 100% what you want to do? Not necessarily. We'll talk about it. But those are options that you won't even consider if you let yourself get trapped into the X marks the spot thing. Okay? So those are basically the forced start positions on the stage. What I'm now going to put, actually got ahead of myself and wrote this out of order. After we have identified our 4 start positions, we now have to identify what is the most efficient path through those positions. In other words, what order am I going to go to those positions? First of all, let's identify like what are even our kind of candidates here in terms of what order you would want to go for these positions. We don't even have to talk about targets yet. Just like looking at the ground as if there's a map and these are waypoints we have to go to. What's kind of the pathing options that we have where we might want to go to? So you're saying first there and then kind of around clockwise, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. Is there another option we should at least consider? First here and then what? You go basically do the opposite, right? You're going to have a hard time not going there first because it's so much closer, right? But I could think about going this way. Okay. How do I know for sure which one of those options is the most efficient?
It definitely helps if you're going
Looking at your
clockwise.
longer
The targets are
transitions between
facing
the
the
two.
direction you're going, or like opposite of you. If you go the other way, you almost have to be shooting it backwards.
Okay, so a lot of people, this is particularly going to show up in stages where you can shoot it, moving forward or shoot it front to back. Sometimes if it's kind of a start anywhere type stage, we'll absolutely avoid ever having to shoot while backing up. I'm about to force you to do that a lot today, or at least a little bit. I think there's not necessarily a really good reason to be afraid of that. If, again, all else being equal, if I have the opportunity to shoot moving forward versus going back, will I go forward? Yes. However, if the most efficient way to solve the stage is retreating, do I want that to be a tool in my toolbox that I can pull out and deploy with confidence? 100%. Right? So just looking at the flows, how do I know which one is going to be the most efficient? Okay, close. Oh yeah. So you added in there at the end. We've talked about this before. I'm now remembering, right? So a lot of people, I'm sure all of you have seen someone do the step count thing, right? So hey, I'm gonna get on the stage and I'm just gonna count steps. So I'm gonna get in the start position. I'm gonna see, hey, which path is longer? I'm gonna go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna count and see which path I could take is more steps or longer. And I think that's kind of close to being correct. However, here's the question. If I identify that one of the 2 options requires me to take 3 more steps, but I can stay shooting the whole time, will I do that plan? 100%. I have no problem taking more steps. The goal of a good stage plan is not who can take the least steps, right? For sure. So total step count in that case is not particularly valuable. Again, what I'm trying to eliminate is gaps of not shooting. In other words, typically in our case, like which one requires me to like move the most distance where I'm not shooting. So what if I do a step count, but I only count the steps I'm taking while not shooting? So any steps I'm taking and I'm actually engaging targets and not collecting points, there's no reason to count those steps. Those are steps that solve the problem for me, that gain me points. But anytime I have to lower the gun and run and get the gun back up, I'm going to count those steps because that's a measurement of how much time I'm going to have to spend not shooting while I'm moving with no targets to engage. In order to do this, unfortunately, I kind of have to fully flesh out both plans and figure out what these plans would look like, right? So let's kind of talk through it. Let's go with the first plan where you said go here and then go around clockwise, right? So first of all, as I come in, what target am I going to shoot first?
On the outside, preferably.
Okay, yeah, I mean, most intuitive option by far, right? There's one target that I can see and actually engage already, so you would think, hey, I'm going to shoot my way in. However, what do I have to do before I can actually shoot? Step in and draw the gun. So the question becomes, hey, by the time I step in and actually get the gun out, are either one of the targets available first, or are they both available, basically, by the time I could shoot anyhow? Both available. So if I took left first, does that buy me anything? Does that open up any other options? I could now back out on the right one. So I can't really shoot in the sense, by the time I land there, by the time I can shoot, I'm already in position. So I can't really shoot in, but I could shoot out. So let's assume I'm going to do that. So I'm going to kind of step in, come in on that left target, and now I'm going to back out, right? Now where do I go? Over here. What target do I come in on? In this case, I do shoot in. not a trick question, right? So I'm probably going to come in here, shoot on the outside target, maybe shoot the bottom here, head box. I'm going to kind of cut across up to the front left corner. Now, what target do I come in on in this position? Steel. Why?
Because it's your first available and you're going to transition over.
It's my first available? By the time I'm inside the shooting area, all of the targets are available to me at the same time.
But if you start here, you have to go here and then work your way back over.
True. So it might save me a little bit of time in terms of a transition. What are you saying, Steve?
One on the right here and then back out.
Ah. So what target is keeping me pinned in that spot? Nope.
No, the one in the corner.
That far target down there.
That one by far the most.
Yeah.
Right? And if I get, let's say, all the way over here, the other three targets in this array are still available to me. The one that keeps me pinned in that corner is the one back behind the wall. As I start moving at all, I lose that one, or at least I lose part of it, and it becomes a way harder shot. So if I know, hey, I probably want to move out of this position while I'm collecting points on the way to my next position, and there's one target that keeps me pinned here, I probably want to take care of that target early on in my engagement, right? But do I want to start on that target? Thoughts?
That's a skill level thing?
How so?
With how comfortable you are and what your confirmation is going to be and how you're going to arrive there and get it quickly enough and guarantee the hit.
I mean, I think regardless of skill level, everyone should treat that as a confirmation 3. This would be my suggestion.
Closest target first.
Okay. Why? What does that let me do?
It's easier.
It's easier,
It's easier than keep the
You're
momentum
making up that
going.
time gap of not collecting points.
and I can shoot sooner.
Yes.
In other words, as I come into this position, do I want to like be fully set up and have both feet stable on the ground when I'm shooting that target around the no shoot?
Yeah.
Probably yes. Do I need to be that stable for this one?
No.
No. So when can I start shooting? Earlier.
Yeah.
Right? So I can literally have that target done and eliminated by the time my feet actually land in the shooting area and I'm ready to shoot the first one. So my time to first shot on the far target will be the same, regardless of whether I shoot that one first or not. It's just free points. So maybe I'll shoot in on that one. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what can I do?
Start to move.
Now I can move on the paper and start covering ground to my next forced shooting position while collecting points. I can go 1, 2. Now what? Steel. Do I want to move on steel? Maybe not so much. But does it cost me anything to now pause on steel? Not really. Now I've just covered a couple steps while I'm engaging the paper. I can go ahead and clear the steel. Ding. Now what? To what? To which target? There's only basically one target available to me, the left one by the wall. As I get closer up here to the baseline, that right one's going to expose as well. But I could definitely shoot in on these two targets if I wanted to, right? So I could come over here and I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what?
Now you have to worry about where you're going to be when you take your next shot and if your steel's still going to be available or not.
Right. Watch the camera if you don't mind, brother. So there's other targets I could move on here. There's other work I could do. I could go, 3, 4. But I'm worried about overrunning this position, right? So I probably want to stop. Make sure I'm stopping when I get to that spot to go ahead and clear the steel again, so that I can now move to my final position to clear the last paper.
Then you can hit this guy.
Correct. So I'm going to come off this paper. I'm going to go to steel. Now what?
Hit the head box.
Bottom target.
I can now back out on this one if I want to the head box, and now I can finish here. Sound like a decent plan? Yes, sir.
Under the wall.
No. Usually the targets would not be this low. Obviously, we're directing the rounds down in the soft dirt in this case. But regardless, always walls are assumed to go up and down to infinity is the rule, unless otherwise specified. Yes, sir.
Back to this position here.
Okay.
When you come in shooting this closer target here.
Sure.
Then you set up for the long one.
Right.
And then
move on paper.
Or still.
No, I wouldn't drag my gun across the paper to get to the steel and then bring it back.
No. Yeah, I'm saying paper, then steel.
Right.
Okay.
That steel will be my last. For me, that'll be the last target in that position.
Yeah. Okay.
Would it
Okay.
be better to hit the head box while you're still for the steel and then walk out on the bottom?
You could do it either way.
Okay.
All else being equal, regardless of whether it's a head box or not, if there's a stack, I would tend to do bottom up. Right now, the classic explanation you'll get for that is, well, you're going to ride the recoil. Not really a thing. I'm not really concerned about that. But here's the thing. Imagine I shoot the head box first. I'm shooting you in the head. Now, I'm going to transition down to the body. What's the first part of me that should move as a part of that transition? Eyes, right? To look where? At the target, which my hands and gun are blocking now. And I can't see it until I go to actually see where I'm going. So I would definitely prefer to go bottom up. If there was a significant advantage to going top down, fine. However, by the time I step on this transition and go ding da da, I'm basically stopped anyway, where I want to be.
Yeah.
So now I can just go bop and come over. So I don't think it's a major risk factor, but you could do it either way. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you're going to touch on this already, but can we see the steps as if the steel would have been your first shot from here, if you would have continued to go in and then work this way and finish here?
The steps would be exactly the same.
Okay.
The steps would be no difference in steps. The only real difference is going to be two things. Number one, now you're not moving on the draw. So in this case, you had to move to the corner anyway. So you're doing the movement you had to do and the draw at the same time. So you basically get free draw time because you have to do that movement. So you burn your draw. So whatever your draw time is to that steel is now you're adding that time. However, you would be weighing that against what's the risk of me overrunning this position, basically, right? So again, that's kind of a risk management thing you would have to kind of weigh for yourself. 100% that's slower. There's no doubt in my mind. It's going to be slower versus a perfect execution of the other plan we just looked at. But there's a risk there. And again, is that faster than like overstepping that and having to come back? Yeah, probably. Right? So you have to kind of weigh that for yourself. Let's quickly, for sake of time, think about the other plan. Okay, so if I'm going to come now to the corner and work the stage counterclockwise, do I still come in on the same target, or do I do it different? I mean, you could do it either way. Like, I'm not backing out now. I'm going forward. So you go right to left, left to right. Not really super important, right? But I would kind of come in one target, then the other. Now what do? What's the first target I'm going to shoot as I move up to the front?
The one to the left.
I would agree. I mean, that's by far the first one that's really available to me, right? So I'm coming up to this target. Maybe I could even, depending on confidence level, I could use that head box to fully settle. Now what do?
Now you have to work your way to your right and then start backing out.
Yeah, my next position's over here. I want to go this way. The target that's keeping me pinned here until I clear it is that one. So I want to eliminate that one so that I can start moving, right? 100%. Yeah, so I would go to that, right? And now I've got to get over here somehow. Yeah. So again, there's a couple options. Ideally, if I could move on that one, maybe I come straight to steel so that now I can use these to cover this ground, something like that. Going to be partially skill set dependent though, right? Now I'm going to come over here. What do I do now?
I guess you hit steel.
Probably exactly what we looked at in reverse, right? Because otherwise, I've got to lower the gun and run over here just so I can ready to shoot the paper, right? But if I come in on steel and clear that one, right? Now, again, I can use the paper to get over here. Bop. I can now maybe back out of position a little bit. Now I've got to do a retrograde movement as I come into this position to step in and clear this paper. Okay, so now we've got kind of two plans. So again, as I do this, I'm only going to count steps taken while not shooting. I also, I usually, when I do this, because both plans start the same way, I won't count the first step because they both do the same thing. Again, I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between the two plans, right? So either way, I'm stepping in here, right? Now I'm shooting this target, maybe taking a step out to shoot this one. Now I got to lower the gun for probably a couple steps here as I come in here. So I'll start counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ding, ding, da, 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 da. That was basically 5 steps total of not shooting that I had to take, right? The 2 kind of gaps in between the shooting time. Let's say if I go the other way, you know, I'm stepping this way, same thing, so I won't count this step. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 1, 2, 3. Da 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 da. Ding, da 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 da. Maybe 4. Ding, da 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 da. 5, 6, 7, 8. Da 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 da. So 5 steps of not shooting versus 8 gives me a pretty solid estimation of, all else being equal, which one is the most efficient, which one's going to require me to spend more time moving where the gun's down and I'm not doing any shooting, right? I feel like a lot of, you know, top shooters, you know, kind of approach stages and don't really have a solid process for actually kind of getting a concrete estimation of which plan on a stage is more efficient, right? They kind of just go with gut feeling and like which one flows better, and they kind of hope they'll outshoot it if they don't have that kind of the best plan. And by the way, a lot of times they can, but you know, again, maybe you're not the best shooter at the match, right? But man, if I figure out a plan on this stage just a second and a half faster than you, man, I'll take that advantage out of the gate every single time without having to shoot any faster or be any better. By the way, if the answer for you is to get better at shooting, that's something you can only do over time through a lot of reps and effort and training, right? But man, if you can learn a process that helps you figure out an efficient stage plan right now, you can make big gains, right? Without necessarily needing a ton of skill set. Yes, sir.
So some of the area matches, they post their stages beforehand.
Yeah.
Do you study those and do your stage planning before the
No.
match, or do you do it live?
No. Because, you know, I think it's fair to say at every match you're going to go to, and the stages always look a little bit different on the ground. In some cases, they are dramatically different. Different start positions, different target. Like, I mean, in some cases you're like, why did you even put together a match book? Like, this is not the same match, right? It's not the same, right? And so I think that at best, it's a bit of a waste of time to do a lot of stage planning off the match book. At worst, you have like a lot of preconceived ideas in your head that are tough to reprogram when you actually get on the ground. Basically, all I'm looking at in the match book is, okay, you know, are there any unique challenges that I'm likely to face a decent amount in this match that I might want to include in my training plan? Is there a bunch of strong hand, weak hand? Is there a bunch of steel at distance? Is there 30% tuxedos? You know, is there a bunch of swingers, right? Like, is there any weird start positions? Hey, there's like 3 table starts in this match where you have to run somewhere else and grab a magazine or whatever. Is there anything unique? Hey, there's a prone stage. You know, is there anything specific that I might want to integrate into my training plan that I wouldn't usually be working on a lot, but is going to be an important challenge for this match? I'll look for that. Do I try to recreate stages specifically, or, you know, again, do stage planning? No, not at all, to be honest. That makes sense? Okay, you may notice we have not talked about reloads yet at all. We have reloads, and we're now going to put in here as number 4. So we have step 3 is figure out what your most efficient path is, and we'll do that by sort of looking at our steps spent not shooting. We'll now account for reloads, right? Now, I think about this last in this phase on purpose. I think this is maybe less of an issue now, especially when folks were shooting low cap divisions more. We used to see like a really common practice of kind of getting on the stage, and like the very first thing you would want to look at is, where am I going to reload? And of course, where do you want to reload? Well, you want to reload in the nice big comfortable gap of no shooting, where you have lots of time to reload and you're not really stressed about it, right? And so you almost start looking for those big gaps of no shooting on the stage and almost force those into your plan sometimes and end up like picking a less efficient plan on purpose because it makes it easier for you to do your reload, which is not what we want. So the way I kind of think about stage planning, I'll at first basically imagine that I have enough ammo in the gun to shoot the whole stage without having to reload. And then I'm going to say, okay, there's the most efficient plan. I've identified it. Now, where along that path is my best place to reload? And we'll work it in. Maybe once or twice in all the stages I've ever shot, when I went to think about the reload, changed the plan a little bit because there was literally nowhere to do it, and we made some minor adjustments. But almost always, the best way to approach a stage is find out what is the most efficient plan, and then just reload along that path wherever you have time. So, where are the logical places on this plan that we just identified to reload? So we've got a big gap of no shooting there, right? That we could definitely reload. You're saying up here, however, I don't have to stop shooting at all across the front. So if I do a reload across the front, I am on purpose picking a slower plan. Is there any other gap of no shooting? There is one here, however, it's only after 4 rounds. So now you have 26 rounds of shooting left to do. I don't think anybody's shooting real open today, so you probably don't have that much ammo left in your gun, right? So we'll probably have to reload later. Now I could reload here. That's still only after 10 rounds. So you've still got at least, what, 20, 21? Something like that? 22? What is it? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It's 20, it's 30. Yeah, so it's 20 rounds. 20 rounds of shooting left to do after this position with the 2 steel and a number of far shots. So again, how many rounds you have in your gun, how comfortable with that are you? That's 100% where I'm going to reload. I'll tell you right now. I'll give you a sneak peek, right? But again, that's not only equipment dependent and, division dependent, but skill dependent, right? How confident are you that you can treat those steel like control targets and guarantee that first round impact to get a reload? Let's say you're not super comfortable with having 20 rounds of shooting to do after your reload. What should I consider doing then? I could think about reloading somewhere else, right? So I could say, hey, man, there's nothing to do. I'm going to force a reload in a less efficient spot, and yes, it's going to cost me a second or a second and a half or 2 seconds. My man. So could I do more shooting ahead of the reload? In other words, there's lots of optional targets. Hey, I could shoot that target from back here if I want. I can shoot the steel from back here if I want. I can shoot that paper. I can shoot that paper. I can shoot that steel from back here. There's all kind of targets I could shoot from the back. It's an extra 5 yards, yeah. But I could think about can I do some more shooting before the reload to make the reload more forgiving? I'm not saying you should do that necessarily on this plan. Do I do that on stages pretty often? Yes. I'll shoot targets from positions that I might not otherwise to absolutely make the round count kind of work, right? Additionally, don't be afraid to reload twice on stages. So again, this is kind of the thing for looking at the most efficient path. Like pretty often, I did this on stage 1 at Dragon's Cup. Again, we're shooting for. I think most of us are shooting carry optics, limited optics. In USPSA, our max round count is 32. All of us have at least 22 rounds in the gun in competition. You never have to reload twice, but if the 2 logical places to reload are 4 rounds from the beginning and 4 rounds from the end, and I can stay shooting the whole time across the middle, I'll reload twice, 100%. Not afraid to do that at all, versus forcing a gap in the shooting when I could have been collecting points, right? So don't be afraid to reload twice. Maybe not a good idea here. Last resort, right? To your point, I could think about maybe forcing a reload up here somewhere. Might change my target orders a little bit to account for that if I need to, so on and so forth. But I don't think about the reload. What else did we work on yesterday that might be worth working in as a part of our plan here on the stage? Maybe. Let's save that one. What else? My man. Confirmation levels. The confirmation levels are only going to be useful to you if you use them. Okay? Confirmation levels. And I can't talk and spell at the same time. Confirmation levels. And what I'm going to write as a part of this is spots. What do I mean? So first of all, man, I highly recommend, like when you're going through this stage, especially when you're new to this, but I don't think you ever outgrow it. Christian Seiler talks about this still to this day as a part of his plan as the best shooter in the country. I would be thinking about what do you need to see on every target and how are you going to press your trigger for every target. Plan that in. Again, you're always going to have this feeling on a stage that you need to go fast, and that's true. But if you just approach, that steel with the idea of I have to go fast, what are the chances you're going to have the patience to stop, stabilize, see that dot stop in the middle, have your trigger prepped, and send a first round impact right in the middle with confidence and be able to leave before you even hear the ding, knowing you just shot that thing in the middle? For most of us, highly unlikely. You're going to send 2 or 3 at it. I'd rather think about it as part of my plan. Hey, stop the dot in the middle, have the trigger prepped, send a first round impact with confidence as a part of the plan. And conversely, on targets where I can be aggressive, I don't want to spend any more time aiming at them than I have to. I'm thinking confirmation 1, baby. Flash of red, send it. So I'm going to think through how much you need to see, how are you going to press the trigger on every single target, and on partials, any kind of no-shoots, that kind of thing. I'm going to think about where do I need to aim. We'll see. I'm not sure if we have. Yeah, we definitely do, right? So you guys can look at this. I'll bring the camera over so you can see as well. If you look at this target here from yesterday, you'll notice that there's a big clump of hits, like right here on this target, hanging out up here in the Charlie. Why? Because no one even paid attention to the fact that the target's upside down and that I need to aim at a different spot. Here, there's basically no hits there, right? But that's where I would want to aim. Okay, I'm gonna pick that. Some of us yesterday were shooting for the credit cards on targets at 5 yards, and it never even occurred to you to think I might want to aim higher in the credit card versus right in the middle of that thing. If I have headshots at 5 yards, I'm gonna think about that. Aim a little bit high, bro. Pick spots, specific spots on targets that you want to aim at. Hey, I've got a no-shoot over here hanging out around the wall. I can get the whole A zone. Does that mean I want to aim dead center in that alpha?
Probably not.
I probably will, but again, it's skill set dependent, right? Pick a spot ahead of time. Don't wing it in the middle of the stage and pick where you're going to shoot, because you're going to do one of two things in that case. You're either going to aim over in the delta because you're afraid of the no-shoot, or you're going to go, don't shoot that thing, and you're going to look at the no-shoot, and you're going to plug one right in the no-shoot. Like, those are one of the two things you're probably going to do if you wing it in the middle of the stage, versus saying, no, that's the spot that I'm going to aim at on that target. So confirmation levels and pick spots to think about as you go, right? I think that's enough to think about for right now. Already, you might be noticing that we have a lot to think about and plan and kind of problem solve and puzzle through on a stage. There's the question. Do I have the opportunity to plan through stages in this level of detail if I wait to start for my 3-minute walkthrough? And the answer is no, right? So if you really do want to master this skill set, of course, you're going to get faster and faster at it over time. I watch guys like Max Leograndis is mind-blowing to me. He will drive all night from one area match to the next, and he'll show up 5 minutes before the match starts, and he shows up on stages and somehow figures out the best stage plan in like a matter of seconds, and like is hacking stages in ways that no one else saw. Mind-blowing, right? That's after you've done a lot of stages, especially when you're starting this process, right? You're not going to do it in your squad walkthrough. You don't have enough time. So even for locals, I'm going to get there, especially if you have a good local where the stages are available early. I'm going to get there at least an hour early to the match and walk through all of the stages before the match starts. So by the time it starts, I already have all my plans down. I already know what I'm doing. And when I'm getting on the stage, that's just like a rehashing of the memory thing, right? So I'm going to walk through that stage. I have my plans down. At majors or whatever, I'll show up the day before or whenever I have an opportunity to get those plans down well before the match even starts.
How often do you change them in that 3? You see somebody else
pretty often.
You didn't catch?
Pretty often. This is one of those things, it's funny, I talk about it all the time, when you start shooting USPSA and you show up to matches, and the extremely well-meaning and nice B-class mafia will love to give you advice on how to shoot stages and stuff, right? And again, like, it's just highly unlikely that those B-class shooters can tell you how to be a GM, because they would be a GM if they knew, right? And so a lot of that advice is well-meaning, but not very useful. Like, one of the things I was always told when you started, hey man, never change your plan last minute, it'll completely screw you up and so forth. Then you start shooting on like super squads and with like good shooters and stuff, and you see that everybody changing their plan like at the absolute last second. You're like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to do that. JJ Ricazza, don't do that, that kind of thing. And it's like, no. Hey man, if I'm sitting there before my stage and I realize that dude just shot a plan that's 2 seconds faster than mine, do I want to have the ability to change that? Frankly, yes. Now again, is that a skill that you have? Can you do that? That's a question you have to know for yourself. And that's something that, you kind of have to train and work on. For me, one of the reasons I think you see top guys shooting more like staged all the time. We talked about Eric Rafael yesterday, doing a lot of like just never shooting the same thing twice, just shooting a stage, changing it, shoot something different. That's literally reps of fully programming in a plan for your stage, shooting it, and then forcing yourself to change, come up with a different plan on that stage, and going again. So when you train like that all day, every day, is changing your plan last minute on stage easy? Yes. If you don't, then it may wreck you, right? So again, it has to be something that, are you comfortable with that, and can you do it? But yes, I'm changing plans last second very, very commonly, for sure. usually small adjustments, obviously, but yeah, we'll change it for sure. But I can only do that if I already know what the stage is. I already know where all the targets are, what the presentations are, where I can see them from. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go there first and there first instead of going the other way or whatever, or changing like a swinger activation timing or whatever it is, you know. Even still, right? Man, this is a lot of stuff to think about and memorize and have kind of programmed in while you're running the stage. A lot of stuff to think about. How do we actually get to the point where we can really program all this stuff in and actually run it in a live stage? One of the very few things I would say is pretty much universally agreed upon among top shooters that visualization is an absolutely crucial tool for this part of the game, as a tool to really memorize and program in your stage plans. So the idea is this. We'll walk through the stage enough times that I have a really good idea of what the plan is. And I'm going to get off the stage, either closing your eyes or looking away from the stage or whatever works best for you, but definitely not looking at the stage, at the targets, looking away. And basically, I'm going to try to visualize in my mind's eye what that stage run is going to look like. What I try to get this to look like for me is like, man, it's that little hat cam footage or GoPro footage of me actually shooting the stage. I'm visualizing what am I going to see, basically, on the stage, right? And I should be able to picture, every wall, every target presentation. If it's a partial, I know what that presentation is. I know where I'm going to aim, all that kind of stuff, right? I know where I'm going to look. I know where my feet are going to go. All those things, right? So I'm going to visualize him and get my start position. And I'm going to step in left foot first as I draw that inside left target back out a little bit on the right, drop the gun for 2 to 3 steps, come in. For whatever reason, the first target over there on the left has its head cut off, but I'm going to shoot to that target, come into the bottom one by the wall, exit out the front on that head box, drop in my reload, come into the front left corner. I'm going to come in on that low, easy target, make sure I clear that one nice and easy by the wall. 1, 2, back out on paper, hit the steel, come over to the right, 1, 2, 1, 2, hit the steel, come down to the low one, up to the head box, over to the wall, wide right paper, and I'm done. Should be able to picture every single paper on target on the stage and steel and know where they are, what they look like. The one thing that I'll kind of add that you wouldn't see on like your hat cam footage is the actual dot behavior on target. So as a part of the fact that I've picked the confirmation levels that I want to shoot each target with, I will picture the dot behaving that way and how I'm going to press the trigger, right? So if it's a confirmation 1 target, I'm just going to picture that flash of color coming on and going bop and just sending that shot, right? If it's confirmation 2, I'll picture the dot coming over and going bop, bop, right? The way that I want to. If it's confirmation 3, I'll picture coming over and stop, press. Actually picturing the dot behavior that I want to see as a part of that visualization to program that stuff in as well. As you go, if you have any question marks, like I can't remember what that target is or what it looks like or whatever, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna go back, look, okay, come back, do it again, right? From there, the more reps you can do of visualizing that stage, once you actually have it down, the better. The more it's going to be programmed in, the more solidly you're going to have that plan down. I would suggest that if you spent time, before that stage, before it's your turn to shoot, doing 20 to 30 reps of visualizing a stage, that would not be too much. Right? That would not be time wasted. The more you can really rep that in, program that in, get it down, the better off you're going to be. What you're looking to do is have that plan programmed in so well that by the time it's time to shoot, you basically get in that start position, you're looking to your first target, you kind of take a deep breath, and when that timer goes off, it's just like hitting play on that pre-written program, and you're just kind of watching it happen. You're not having to physically think through, okay, where's my next target? What do I do now? You're not thinking through all that stuff. You're just kind of observing and watching it happen. You're just executing that program and watching it play out without having to consciously think through it. You simply don't have enough time to consciously think through every step of the plan as you go. Additionally, right, this is a really good test of your kind of subconscious competence, if you will, with the mechanics of shooting as well. Because again, if you're sitting here thinking through, hey man, I got to make sure my grip right, make sure you prep the trigger, make sure make sure you're getting your right stance, right, make sure you're all these things, every single part of the shooting process. Well, then man, your mind isn't focused on what you're doing as a part of the plan, and vice versa, right? So it's kind of that mental bandwidth test. All of that shooting skill stuff has to be wrapped out and kind of programmed into a subconscious level of competence where you don't have to think through that. And then I'm trying to program in the plan to a level of subconscious competence as well, so I can kind of watch and execute that. And the only thing the conscious mind is really doing, again, is kind of observing the run as it's happening and doing error correction if necessary, right? No plan's ever going to go 100%, according to plan. You know, not every footstep is going to land in the exact spot you meant for it to. As much as I like to talk about guaranteeing first round impacts on steel, like you're probably not going to shoot, you know, multiple matches in a row without a single makeup on steel, right? So you're going to have to observe when things go a little bit different from the plan, make those corrections. And now I've got that bandwidth because the plan's kind of running in the background to go, hey man, I just took a makeup on steel. Does that mean I don't have enough ammo to finish this thing now? Do I need an extra reload I didn't plan about? You know, those kind of thought processes have a place to kind of run now as I'm making sure that I get back on the plan as much as I can after those errors kind of occur. All that kind of makes sense? Yes, sir.
Is there a good way to flush out like what you just talked about? So, for example, the difference in skill between, you know, myself and you, I'm 100% confident that you could choose a completely less ideal stage plan and probably outshoot me with the most ideal stage plan. So when you're seeing that at a match and you're watching different levels of shooters, high level shooters, MA, so forth, how do you flush out, okay, you know mathematically you had the best stage plan, but your execution wasn't there. How do you flush out where those spots were in that execution?
How do you flush out what those spots were?
Yeah, so where so if you have the perfect plan and you're physically capable, where do you flush out, okay, that's where I lost those steps in that plan?
Sure.
Right? Because your execution wasn't at the level of your execution.
Yeah, so, you know, there's different ways, there's different things that you can kind of figure out looking at match data, right? There's different things you can kind of focus on. You know, if you're on a squad with a GM and you shoot the same plan they did, right? Then you can look at your time charts and you can see, okay, literally, if you shot the same plan, you know, bar for bar, like we've done in some of your videos and so forth, you can look on that and be like, I lost 10th of a second here, 100th of a second here, so on and so forth. Obviously, if you shot a completely different plan from somebody, it's much harder to get that kind of feedback in that granular of detail. Now, what you might be able to tell is, hey man, because he did that plan, you know, no matter what, you've got to run from the front to the stage to the back. And it only took him 5 seconds to do that because he shot those two targets backing out, and it took me 3 seconds to do it. So you can still get, even though you maybe did a little bit different plan, like some feedback on, okay, how much time did he spend not shooting versus how much time did I spend not shooting, and why is that the case, right? So you can still kind of try to figure that stuff out, but the feedback is not going to be, you know, as granular for sure if you shot completely different plans. Like, it's going to be a lot harder. You can certainly look at, hey, what's his average split versus my average split? What's his average transition versus mine? Like, you know, you can kind of compare some of that kind of stuff, but you're not going to be like, I lost a 10th of a second right there. It's not going to be that specific. You know what I mean? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I more or less just confirming, like, that's still a good way to use match data to try to hone in on your execution and where you fell off on, rather than, like you saying, like, picking the plan that's comfortable with you. Like, it's still probably better to always pick the most efficient plan, even if what you came up with is not what you saw, to then try to make a quick adjustment to get that data.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you know, again, there's lots of ways you can use, especially local matches. You know, the goal at a local is not always, you know, to actually do your best performance, in my mind, right? And for me, locals are training. I can use them for different things. So might you say, hey man, I really want to get some feedback on my specific mechanics. So I'm gonna go shoot with Ike this week, and no matter what, I'm gonna ask him if I can, you know, walk the stage with him ahead of time, and I'm gonna shoot his exact plan every time, so that I can get bar for bar feedback on how's my movement, what are my splits like, how are my transitions, all right? I can get that data and I can go work on that piece. So you might make the decision to do that on occasion, right? And then in other cases, you're like, hey, I actually want to perform to my best ability right now to get an assessment on how I stack up right now in A class or whatever, right? And you're like, I'm going to use the best plan, I think, for me on every stage, and I'm just going to see what my overall performance is. You could do that too. So it's going to be two, like, very different approaches there, depending on kind of what your goals are. But yeah, I don't think it's like a right or wrong way to look at it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on that? Okay. Probably not to think about right now. So, obviously, we've kind of fleshed out a plan that I kind of feel is the most efficient way to solve this stage. I am not suggesting that you have to do this plan bar for bar the way that I would do it. Obviously, you're going to think about, how much ammo do I have in the gun? How confident am I shooting these targets in the move? We haven't even talked about movement yet. We're going to work on that a lot today, and we'll come back and definitely shoot the stage a couple times before the end of the day and kind of program or work some of those layers into the stage and fill out the rest of the checklist as we talk about that. Make sure you have the plan, though, that's down for you, where you're going to reload, target order engagement, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you kind of flesh that out for you, what you think like it's going to work best. I want to see everybody off the stage watching that movie a few times at least, right? I want to see you visualizing, kind of program that in, getting your plan down, and then we'll go ahead and run it. I'll work up the shooting order, everything.
What's your splits going to be?
We're going to be 5 under.
Short splits? 10,
Raw time 17.
18, you think? 17?
17. 17.
For him?
17?
15. You'll find it somewhere.
All right, 15,
I mean, however fast you tell him to go, he's going to do it. It's going to be like Night Walker.
All right, 2 seconds.
There it is.
I'm saying
Swan dive.
17.
Okay. My SRO has literally died. Stand by.
I'm like, where's what? It's been on their website. It said new for like 4 months. I can't find it.
Yeah.
Called my LE buddy. Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. $17-13.
I was right. I was right.
I thought that was a pretty good estimate. Score is missing a time. Oh, sync. Review. Okay. It's kind of, yeah. John's at 17 out there. Maybe go for it. So seven Charlies. 7, 9, 3.
That's close.
Super close. Super close. All right. So takeaways, right? From the run so far. Seeing a couple things, right? So obviously, like, the biggest thing that hurt a lot of people's scores is penalties. Mics and no shoots, right? Now, some of the mics are on 5-yard open targets. In that case, it's almost always the second shot, as I was noticing. So your first shot's good. You come up and you go, "Bada!" and you leave. No aiming of that second shot at all, right? The eyes are like already off of it, even maybe. Sending 2, and it doesn't even occur to you that you weren't even looking at that target when the gun went off, right? So that, what does that tell me? You're not actually even thinking confirmation. You're not thinking about any kind of aiming scheme, right? Because your eyes weren't even looking at the target. So that's an issue, right? Where were some of the other ones? Obviously the far targets. I'm starting to think I may have made that slightly too challenging for the group, right? But here's where I see a lot of those penalties coming from, is positioning things. I mentioned a couple of this to you, like during the walkthrough, right? But it's one of those things where, you know, a lot of you guys, as an example, on this one in the corner, are trying to shoot that target from like here, where I've got half the A zone available on a 20-yard partial. Whereas if I just get to right there, I've got a little bit of the left side Charlie, let alone the whole alpha. So paying attention to, hey man, especially on these super tricky targets, where I want that target to be as forgiving as possible. Same thing over here in the corner. It's like, man, you know, saw a lot of people shooting from right here. Again, I've got about half the alpha from here. Whereas if I get here, I got even a little bit of the right side Charlie. So really looking at, okay, if I want this target to be as forgiving as possible, where specifically do I want to be? Where do I want to land when I'm shooting that target? Picking out those spots for the movement. Haven't really talked about entries and exits yet. It's something we're going to talk about a lot today. Planning how you come into those positions so you can land in those specific spots to, again, without getting any better at shooting, make those targets all of a sudden a lot easier and more forgiving on yourselves just by being in the right spot. That makes sense? What else did you guys notice? Anything that was an issue for you on the run this morning?
Yeah, forgot there was a cardboard back there.
Forgetting, right? So here's the deal, man. I was kind of joking a minute ago when I was like, if you're done visualizing, I assume you've got it down and there's no shot you're going to forget, right? But I'm just telling you, every time you get on the stage and you notice that, or there's like a moment of uncertainty or you forget something on a stage, to me, that's like Should be a reminder, like, I did not visualize enough. I didn't have it down. Like, it wasn't fully programmed in yet. That's what that equals. Forgotten target or forgotten plan equals I didn't memorize it enough. Like, that should be the result there. Hey, the next time, if I did 10 visualizations, next time I'm gonna do 15. See if that works. I'm gonna do a little bit more work on that pre-planning piece, right? What else? Anything?
In my mind, everything sped way up as soon as I heard the buzzer.
Yeah. Right? And that's why it's so crucial, right? Again, for the reasons we talked about yesterday, relying on a preconceived idea of pace to control the shooting doesn't work in the most ideal circumstances. But under pressure, when you're feeling that pressure to go fast, and then your perception shifts of how fast or how slow you're going, right? And man, a lot of times your perception does not match reality. So now the thing that you're relying on to control the speed of the shooting is lying to you. Now you're really in trouble, right? And so it's like, man, all of us have got to continue to work on ignoring that pace idea. I need to go fast when it comes to the shooting. It's like, nope, here's a plan. Here's what I need to see. Here's how I'm going to press the trigger. However long that takes is how long it takes. Like, yes, I want that process to occur quickly, but that's determined by how much skill I showed up with today, right? All I can control is, did I execute the process or not, right? That's all we can do. There's that old, saying that's been going on in the tactical world forever. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level you're training, that whole thing. Somebody wrote a book recently, I can't remember the name of it, but he had like a tweak on that, which I thought was good, which is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So if you approach the stage with I want to go this fast, or I want to beat this guy. If you approach the stage with those kind of performance-oriented goals in mind, in my experience, it almost never goes well. It's got to be, what's the system? What's the process that I'm relying? My goal for the stage is to execute the system. If I do that, then my score should reflect the skills that I brought to the table today, which is all that I can ask for. It's all I can ask for, right? So that's an important shift in focus. We are going to dive into movement today, which I think is the other thing which is going to help a ton of people. I'm seeing a lot of inefficiencies in various movements on the stage, which is causing bigger gaps in time between positions that I think we can really, really tune in and hopefully see some improvements even by later today. So we're going to go hit that. We're going to need some ammo. So let's take a minute, go top off mags and so forth, and then we'll talk movement a little bit. We're going to get into shooting on the move a little bit. We'll work in a couple different contexts throughout the day and talk about kind of how it applies to stages and so forth. We obviously have some squared away shooters here in the group. I feel confident that shooting on the move is not like a brand new concept to any of you. So we're not going to spend a lot of time sitting here like really working on, the super fine, basic, motor skill mechanic type stuff. But I at least want to talk through it and talk about how to train it. And we'll do a couple dry reps of that, just to make sure everyone has kind of a good baseline on that stuff, right? So shooting the move. What is the tricky part about shooting the move? What's the issue we're working with?
Not making a gun move so much while you're moving.
Okay, so the process of walking instead of standing stably is introducing some unpredictable movement into the gun as I'm walking, right? What part of that walking or stepping process is doing that the most? What disturbing the sights the most?
Coming down.
That footfall, right? Because it's sort of arresting your momentum. You're moving along pretty smooth and stably, and then all of a sudden that foot hits, and it's like, your body kind of stops moving for a second as it kind of hits the brakes, especially if you strike with the heel. And man, that gun wants to keep going because it has momentum going, right? And so you're going to see that kind of bouncing in the sights occurring as you're moving. So I like to say that there's kind of two component skills to being good at shooting on the move. The first part is, man, how do I move in such a way that the sights are as still and stable as possible while I'm moving? The sights are disrupted the least amount. Second part's going to be basically the aiming part, right? How do I learn to accept the movement that's left over and time those shots to occur when the sights are actually acceptably located on target? Let's just talk through the first part really quickly, the mechanical part. Basically how to walk and how to move when we're shooting the move to disturb the sights the least. So obviously, that's what we talked about yesterday. If that impact is the problem, just like again, going back to the analogy of suspension on your vehicle, I don't want the energy of that impact to be transmitted all the way up through the body to the gun. I want to absorb that as much as possible. So just like we think about those shocks and spring absorbers, and if you let that foot lock out and impact, that's going to be super abrupt. So I may want to find those springs by softening the knees a little bit, getting a little bit lower my center of gravity, and allowing those knees to sort of allow the body to float a little bit separate from the feet and absorb those impacts. Additionally, if I let the whole sole of the foot impact the ground all at once, that's going to be kind of an abrupt impact. Whereas if I can kind of roll through those steps, where if I'm moving forward, I can kind of roll forward from heel to toe, or if I'm moving backwards, I can roll from toe to heel, or if I'm moving laterally, I can roll across the blade of the foot. All of that is going to kind of soften and spread out the impacts of the impacts and hopefully translate less movement there to the sights. What do you guys think is going to be better, right? Fewer longer strides or more shorter steps? Longer? Why?
Because that gives your body enough time to kind of dissipate the energy as it's stepping.
Okay.
More time to take a shot in between if you need to.
Okay, so if the real problem is the impact, right? I do that like the 80s SWAT TV thing, and I'm kind of going like this, right? When are my sights not in a state of disruption? They're basically never, right? They're basically being disrupted the whole entire time. Whereas if I spread those strides out a little bit, those impacts are going to be happening less often while I cover the same amount of ground. And now in between those impacts, I'm actually pretty stable for quite a while in that kind of glide or that float, if you will, in between those impacts, where I can get a lot of work done actually with quite a bit of control kind of in between those impacts, right? So you're gonna find there's kind of a sweet spot when it comes to how long your strides are for you, where you're the most stable and can get the most work done. When is it going to be easier to shoot accurately? When I'm moving fast or moving slow? Everyone's scared of that one. It sounds like a trick question. Kind of is, right? So here's the idea. Obviously, the faster and faster and faster I go, potentially the more violent those impacts are going to be, and I might get some more disruption. However, like everything, there's kind of a sweet spot. You can get too much of a good thing. Sometimes when people are struggling shooting on the move, they think, man, I just need to slow down and slow down and slow down and slow down kind of the pace. And what you'll kind of end up with, if I just kind of hold my arm out, right, you'll see that as I kind of step, if I slow down so much that I end up doing this kind of pause step thing, it'll be like this kind of deal, right, where the sights are really getting disrupted quite a bit every time I really move, and there's not a whole lot of it doesn't really stabilize that much. Versus if I just get some momentum and keep moving, like I can hold that way more stably as I'm kind of moving with the right amount of momentum. It's kind of like riding a bike, right? When is it difficult to stabilize your bike? When you're sitting still, right? Or when you're not going very fast, especially. When you pick up that little bit of speed, things kind of stabilize, right? Very different idea, obviously, in shooting on the move, but it's kind of analogous to it, in the sense that you need to have a little momentum going really to kind of stabilize well. I feel like we can also think about kind of how the feet are impacting the ground, right? So everyone's sitting right now, but if we were all standing like normal, you'd probably see a lot of guys doing some version of this, right? Toes kind of spread out, kind of crow foot, if you will. If I try to obviously walk like this and now I'm roll stepping, what's probably going to happen is that heel's going to impact, and now I'm going to kind of roll to my left, and then I impact and roll to the right, and impact and roll to the left. You'll get that kind of side to side sway going. So it might be beneficial to think about how those feet are actually positioned and actually point those toes kind of in my direction of travel, assuming I'm moving directly towards or away from a target. This might change a little bit when I'm moving sort of laterally to a target. We talked about yesterday with transitions, how obviously if there's a target that's sort of off center from me, what I'd like to avoid doing is obviously compromising that structure, right, where the gun's no longer going to really behave the way that I want as I'm shooting. I'd rather keep that structure consistent from the hips up if I can, kind of use those hips to really transition, try to get my belly button, if you will, pointed at the target as much as possible, have my natural point of aim aligned at the target as much as possible to where that structure really is the same as I'm shooting. Problem being, as I'm walking this way, I'm only able to go so far before I can't really turn the hips anymore. I'm going to kind of run into that bind, obviously. If I do that, right, I go ahead and I transition to basically where that bind point is, where I can't really go any further. The only thing I'm going to change here is take this toe and pivot it around on the heel, right? Everything's going to stay the same. I go to the bind, and now I just pivot with that toe. it opens my hips up significantly more and allows me to get much more square to the target on a much wider sort of angle there. So if I'm moving laterally to the target, what I'll typically do, whatever foot is furthest from the target will be kind of pointed in my direction of travel. Whatever foot is closer to the target will stay pointed towards the target. And I'm still just walking normally, right? So if I was just walking this way, obviously I'd be going like this. If I now do that with my toe pointed this way, I'm still walking just with a toe pointed this way, which is kind of weird. And now I'm doing it while looking and pointing the gun this way, but still just walking normally as I kind of go there, right? Additionally, last thing we can kind of think about is how wide apart the feet should be. We did a lot of talking yesterday about stance, being prepared for aggressive movement, how I like to be feet spread apart, knees bent. Me particularly, I like to be nice and wide so I can be super explosive coming out of positions. Well, obviously, if I go to try to shoot on the move like this, right, I'm going to kind of get that waddle kind of situation going, right? Not going to be very stable. But conversely, what people tend to do for whatever reason, intuitively, is more along the lines of kind of walking the DUI line, right? Where again, I'm going to get nice and top heavy and I'm not going to be very stable this way either. Again, I wouldn't try to tell you, false alarm. I wouldn't try to tell you exactly how far apart your feet should be, but the way I kind of conceptualize it for me is like, I don't want to feel like, my feet are spread apart when I'm shooting the move. I also don't really want to feel like they're like coming together in the middle. I kind of like them to be basically straight up and down, to where as I'm walking, right, the legs are kind of just basically moving straight forward and backwards in that y-axis, if you will, without that side-to-side movement. It's essentially what all of this is trying to do is not only soften the impacts, but really neutralize any side-to-side movement in the sights as I'm moving. We should be able to kill most of that and really just be left over with a little bit of that up and down bounce as the feet are kind of impacting, right? So that's kind of that first component, things to think about in terms of how am I moving, how am I walking to soften the movement of the dot as much as possible while I'm moving. This component not only can but should be trained, I think, in isolation, meaning to train this piece, I don't have to be touching my trigger at all. I'm just working movement, right? Put a sticky note up at the end of your hallway, put your dot on it, and walk and see how still can I keep that dot basically while I'm moving, and make changes in that formula of all those variables we talked about. How low are you? How tall are you? How long are your strides? All that stuff, and try to find the combination that's best for you in terms of the optimal, most predictable dot behavior as you go, right? And now, once we've kind of done that, and just also, again, that can be worked, obviously, because we're not touching the trigger for that, it can be worked to infinity and dry fire, right? So really don't need to like spend a bunch of money and ammo and range time on that. That can just be worked, obviously, to infinity and dry fire. Component 2, a little bit different, right? How do I time my shots now with the movement that's left over to occur when the sights are actually optimally located on target? A couple things that are going to be really crucial here. Once again, vision and hard target focus on a very specific spot. We saw yesterday, back from 25, where we did a little vision exercise, and you guys found that when you stared at the dot instead of staring at the target, the gun by itself, without any movement going on, starts increasing that wobble zone quite a bit, right, when you become dot focused. And that's, of course, because your eyes are not giving the gun corrections on where it's supposed to be aimed at specifically. This problem is going to increase exponentially when there's now unpredictable movement added to the gun anyway, right? Because I'm walking, right? Now as the dot's bouncing around the target, if my eyes are just following it as it's moving, it doesn't know where it's supposed to be going. It's not getting any of those corrections. Versus if I can stare a hole and exactly on the target where I want those guns to go, then I'm going to be giving constant corrections to the gun and where I want it to kind of recover to, right? So vision, crucial. Along with that, do we think it is likely that it might take me a little bit longer to get the confirmation that I need on these targets because of the unpredictable nature of how the gun's moving? Probably, right? Which gives me more time to do what?
Prep.
Be a little more careful on the trigger, right? Prep is something that I personally will absolutely emphasize when shooting on the move. Again, for basically 3 reasons. Number 1, I have time, most likely. So why not? Number 2, it gives me a little bit more forgiveness, right? Because I'm not able to control where the gun is aimed at with the same degree of precision, it gives me a little bit more forgiveness to make sure I'm not moving the gun when I press the trigger. And number 3, it gives me a little bit more control over, since the gun is most likely sort of streaking across the target as I'm pressing the trigger, it gives me that little bit more of an edge in terms of control on when exactly that shot breaks as the dot comes across. So vision and trigger. Let's think about the actual aiming process, though, in terms of confirmation levels. So, confirmation 3, will that work for you on the move?
Probably not.
Why not?
Too much movement.
Are you ever going to see a still stopped dot sitting in the middle of something while you're walking? No. So in terms of a planning, strategy, probably a pretty good indication that if you're looking at a target you feel like calls for confirmation 3, maybe don't try to shoot that on the move, right? Because you're not going to get confirmation 3 shooting that target on the move. What about confirmation 2? 100%. Almost custom designed to be used when shooting on the move. Why? Confirmation 2 is all about the gun does not have to stop and settle. Yes, it's a reactive aiming scheme, which doesn't rely on predictive movement, but it's going to be still moving, right? So if the gun's coming across the target, that's totally fine. I'm just pressing as that dot basically crosses through the acceptable point, the acceptable area on target, right? So that's almost like custom designed as a default. That's going to work really, really well when shooting on the move, right? So confirmation 2 would probably be the default. What about confirmation 1? Will that work on the move?
You skipped over 2.5.
I did. I did. What about 1? Sort of, right? So, look, if I've got a 3-yard open target, right? Could I come by at a full sprint and just be like, da-da, right, as I come through? Yeah, sure, right? But, remember that confirmation 1 is a predictive aiming scheme, meaning you're probably not really necessarily aiming those follow-up shots because you're predicting that by the time you can get the gun to go off again, the dot will be back good enough, which requires the gun to be behaving predictably. Is the gun going to be returning to a specific spot in recoil nearly as predictably when I'm shooting on the move, adding that unpredictable movement into the gun's behavior? Probably not. So that means that the target difficulty there shifts quite a bit. I mean, for me, even as close as like 5 yards, right? Unless it's an extremely high hit factor stage, if I really want alpha shooting on the move, I'm very, very quickly going to transition to confirmation 2. It's pretty much my default on all targets when I'm shooting on the move. Just using that little bit of extra time to be reactive with the aiming scheme so that I can really not only control where those shots are going and have a higher percentage of getting the points that I want, but I can also call those shots because I'm really waiting to actually see where the dot's returning to before I press the trigger. So I have a much greater ability to really call where those shots are going and make sure that I'm getting the hits that I need on every target. Questions on any of that? All that kind of making sense? Yes? Okay. We're going to kind of do a little bit of dry work on kind of component 1, right? So what we're basically going to do, I'm going to have you guys in a minute line up here at the 25. We've got some stuff to work around. We're going to try to get in the middle or just find kind of a clear lane, right? And we're going to walk all the way down basically to the berm. You can start from the low ready, so you can already have your grip established, all that kind of stuff. On the move command, all I'm going to have you do is simply pick a spot on the berm to aim at. If there's a target there, great. If not, you're aiming at a leaf or a stick or something. All of that is fine. You're simply going to put your dot on that spot and walk down to the berm. And as we go, for each iteration, we'll experiment with a different layer of the things that we just kind of talked about there, right? So we'll say, hey, for this one, I want you to experiment with how low in your stance should you get. So you can start, stand up super tall, walk, see what the dot does. Get a little bit lower, see what the dot does. Get a little bit lower, see what the dot does. And try to tune in on the sweet spot for how low in your stance should you be. Maybe for the next one, we'll say, okay, how long should your steps be? And we'll just kind of go through a few quick reps like that and try to tune in a good kind of combination of those variables for you if you're not familiar with all those kind of concepts already. It's kind of the mechanics where the dot is hopefully a little bit quieter for you as you are shooting on the move. And then we'll go kind of work on it a little bit more of a stage context to kind of a little bit of throttle control combined with the aiming piece. And we'll see how much it pays off in terms of time and so forth. Will that make sense? All right. Awesome. Who noticed a difference there? Found anything interesting?
I noticed that if I try to roll my heel like heel to toe too much, you end up with a heel strike.
Sure.
It introduces more bounce.
Yeah.
So you got to find like a nice spot on your heel that you ideally want to land on first.
Correct. What you'll see a lot of people doing too is like the more you try to lengthen the stride, you'll see guys doing this. Like they'll reach the foot out and it comes back like this. Like you almost have to bring it back because you're reaching farther than you're actually covering that ground, right? So yeah, in all things, in every single one of these variables, there is obviously extremes on either end that are too much or too little of a good thing, and you're trying to find that spot in the middle. And the sweet spot, I really do think, is different person to person, right? As an example, what takes more leg strength, as I'm walking? Walking like this or walking like this? The latter, right? So man, some combination of like how much you can squat versus how much you weigh, like that's going to have an impact on where you're comfortable at in terms of ride height, right? How long are your legs versus how tall are you? How big of feet do you have? Like I think all these are variables that kind of impact the mechanics there a little bit. So, but this is kind of an iterative approach. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of how to work on, experiment on these ingredients. Excuse me. Swallowed a bug or something. Unfortunately, all of these layers are mutually dependent. So, if I want to lengthen my steps and I experiment with that standing tall, well, my steps can only be so long. But as soon as I get lower, now I can step way farther if I want to. So every time you change one of those ingredients, if you will, it might change the sweet spot for a bunch of other stuff. So it's a constant system of experimentation and continuing to find kind of that middle ground, that sweet spot for you along all those things. But again, you don't even need to be pressing the trigger here. You can just be working this in dry fire to infinity at home and really kind of working this out. All that making sense so far, and that's kind of a basic look at some of the kind of core fundamentals there. Just want to make sure we start from a good baseline, have a good idea of kind of how to look at and train those things. Questions on any of that so far?
How often do you consider the ground that you're going to be doing this on? Like transitioning from a grass to a gravel to like a hard surface walkway, things of that nature.
It can make a bit of a difference for sure. In the sense of, I kind of think about it again like off-road suspension, right? So Steve, hopefully I'm not way off base on this, but like your race suspension, obviously on the hardball, is way different than my off-road truck, right? When I'm going off-road, I got big bumps and stuff. You want to soften those springs. You get a lot more give in the tires, right? Same thing here. When I'm competing at Lake Norman, flat, smooth concrete, guess what? I can get away with not much suspension. I can stand up nice and tall, and there's not nearly as much disruption. The more you get out here, some of you guys may have felt like stepping in a little bit of a hole there, some bumps there and so forth. You'll sometimes see me, right? I'll start back here, I'll be walking, and maybe I've got a sweet spot, that's kind of somewhere in here, and all of a sudden I'll hit a hole, and you'll see me go, like I'm going to drop a little bit, soften that suspension up a little bit to kind of absorb those bumps better. So it certainly is a consideration. I don't think for me, and maybe this is right or wrong, I'm typically not going to, survey the terrain and think ahead of time, well, this is how high I need to be. But you'll get used to, as you're doing it, kind of feeling how rough it is, combined with how fast you're moving, and making those adjustments in kind of how you're moving to kind of, make up for it. Right, 100%.
Yeah, hot take, people who shoot classifiers not on gravel are cheap.
I mean, yeah. Well, maybe that'll be a little bit more, even more of a thing now. I mean, most of the traditional classifiers don't have a whole lot of shooting on the move, but so it's not that big of a deal. But
is this the part where I take my gun to the gym and get on the treadmill and just?
You can. I've seen people do it. That's obviously like a super smooth, super controlled pace type of environment, right? So. I would prefer, for me, I'd prefer to do it just walking around the backyard or whatever. Try to get a little bit of uneven surface, but there's tons of ways to work on it, for sure. Anything else on that? Okay, let's go over here to the little mini stage. This is obviously, I didn't set up like a whole stage here with fault lines and everything else. So we're going to use our imagination a little bit. But here's kind of the scenario, right? Start position is on this cone. We're going to imagine that this wall goes all the way that way. And I've got another barrel stack there, which basically is going to force it. I've got two options for how I can shoot this stage, right? If I didn't want to shoot on the move, I could stand still right here, and I could shoot all those three targets, and then I could kind of run up to the next cone and shoot those two targets, or one, either way. And then I could run to the third position and shoot the last target, you know, or two. I've got an option for that middle target there. So that would be 3 positions. Or I could try to shoot on the move. I could start here, and I could try to shoot on the move basically all the way through. Now, the way we typically think about it is like, well, if I stand still, especially on these aggressive targets, I'll be able to shoot a lot faster and maybe more accurately. So shooting faster, again, that feels like going faster. That's going to be nice and quick. What's going to happen to my shooting if I try to do it on the move? You think about it's probably going to slow down, and it's probably going to be less accurate, right? So the question is, which one's going to be faster? When we're answering the question of why shoot on the move, I don't have to answer that question for our tactical brethren. There is obviously lots of reasons to shoot on the move, right, in any kind of defensive situation. However, on the stage, what is the point of shooting on the move? Is it actually worth it? This is a quandary that people struggle with a lot of the time, and particularly if you're not comfortable shooting on the move, a lot of times folks approach the stage almost trying to look for a plan that doesn't require you to shoot on the move, right? It's kind of how we approach the stage. So I'm going to shoot just 2 ways really quickly, and I'll let you guys start shooting. I promise we're going to shoot some today. Okay? And let you guys, but here's how I'm going to do it real quickly. The first thing I'm going to do is send the splits and disregard hits. Okay, so do not judge my points harshly at all. I'm going to intentionally not aim super carefully. I'm just going to try to blaze it, right? Shoot nice and fast, throw 6 rounds, run super hard, throw 4 rounds, run super hard, send 2 more rounds, and we'll see what that results give us in terms of time. Okay, so that would kind of look like this one. Everybody got eyes and ears? Yes? Okay. Almost?
Go ahead, he said.
Okay, so this one might kind of look like this. Okay, so sure enough, hits were not very good. I got at least a mic there, a delta. I think maybe a mic there. Shredded pretty hard. 14 split, 12 split, 15 split, 13 split, etc. Total time for 12 rounds, 573. 573. That was pretty aggressive. I think we would agree. Pretty spicy time. Now, if I was going to shoot this on the move, and I told you I'm going to actually try to get points now. I'm going to be really careful. And I'm going to try to shoot basically all alphas. Maybe 1 Charlie on a course of fire like this. I'm going to basically try to shoot all alphas. What do you think the time difference would be?
Maybe about 2.5 seconds.
Slower? Let's see. I want you to notice the difference in the pace of fire primarily here. Going to be shooting considerably slower. Again, that was, so I don't forget.
Purpose for demonstration, or what you would normally do?
More like basically what I'd normally do, just we're trying to guarantee alphas. Again, that first one was a 573. .531. 531. About a half a second faster right there, right? With a distinctly, obviously different engagement strategy and distinctly different results in terms of our hits, right? So instead of those 12 and 13 splits, we've got a 28, 28, 26, 25, 23, 26, 28. Very manageable. I feel confident everyone here can shoot at that pace, right? So we're not doing anything crazy fast. But here's the deal. On the first run, it took me from shot 6, 148 to about 1.9 seconds to run from there to there. On what should be, we now know, basically a 5-second flat exercise. And then probably about the same. So from shot, that would have been 10 to over there, 494, 1.6 seconds, 1.65 to run from there to there. So all told, we've got what, 3.5 seconds on a 5-second stage spent not shooting. How well is that going to work out for us? Can I afford to spend that much time on this exercise not collecting points? The answer is almost always going to be no. Whereas if I can do two things at the same time, I have to go from point A to point B anyway. So if I can cover that ground that I have to cover while collecting points the whole time, almost always going to be more efficient. Now, obviously, based upon skill level, again, there's always going to be that tipping point where, hey, man, if I put 15-yard partials out here and ask you the same thing, right now there's a risk factor involved. How many makeups are you gonna have to shoot? Like all these kind of questions, right? If I put mini poppers out here, ask you to shoot them on the move, like there's all kind of risk, factors that go on in there and so forth. But man, generally, presuming that the targets presented are well within your capability, I like to say that it's obviously not only gonna be more efficient, but it's so efficient that shooting on the move buys you time to be more careful. Is the idea. Right, Eric Raffel likes to say, man, when you can be efficient like this, it gives you the luxury of shooting slow. And the shooting sports, having permission or the ability to shoot slow and still have a good time is like a luxury. You don't get that chance super often. But when you're doing something this efficiently, like this stage run, and it buys you so much time, you can really afford to be careful enough to guarantee your hits on every target. And now I'm getting faster, not in terms of how I'm shooting, but faster in terms of my total time and more accurate at the same time, which is a win-win. Does that make sense? So the whole goal here as we go through this is obviously going to be to try to stay shooting the whole time. So take a few reps, walk through it dry like you would a stage, and I want you to just kind of approach it with the idea of what kind of pace do I have to move at, how am I going to shoot these targets, and kind of where do I need to go to stay shooting the whole time on these targets as I kind of flow through, right? I'm going to get rid of these next two cones. Those are just for kind of demonstration purposes. All you have to do is get around the wall to shoot those two targets, and you've got to get just to where you can see the last target around the barrel to shoot it from the final position, right? But so however you want to move through here, whatever pace you feel like you need to go, we'll experiment with that. And just again, the whole goal is what I need to do to stay shooting the whole time. Make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, so even without the pressure of shooting, just walking through so far, who found like there was a forced gap somewhere where you finished shooting a target and the next target wasn't yet available? Yes? Where? Before the very last target, most likely. Right? Okay. So if let's say I'm doing a walkthrough, right? And of course, my goal is I want to stay shooting the whole time. And I noticed along my plan, as I'm trying to shoot on the move here, and I didn't get to that target in time. I was done shooting target 5 before target 6 was available. What could I maybe do differently or change about my plan to allow me to stay shooting the whole time?
I changed my direction once I rounded this corner.
Ooh, how so?
I made it more of a retreat straight back because you would get to see that target soon.
All right, CQB angles on the stage, right? If I start walking down range towards a target, right? Man, I got to go all the way down here before I can see it, right? Whereas the more that I stay back, the sooner I have the whole thing available to me, and I can be shooting sooner with less steps. So I can think about how the direction of movement. Let's say I still haven't fixed it. What could I change back here that might make a difference? It's basically two things I could modulate.
Is it changing positions you shoot those targets in? By the chance or no?
I don't really think you have any options in that regard unless you're seeing something I'm not seeing.
Don't go around the wall. You just go from there to
Nah, we're saying you have to do that. So
Try to shorten your transition from here to here so you can come off of this target onto this one quicker.
I mean, that's a good tip, just for life in general. Shorten transitions, I like it. Okay, so what if I shoot the same pace, but I try to move a little bit faster up here? What's going to happen? I'm going to cover more ground while shooting the same targets, which means that when I get done with target 5, I'll be farther. Make sense? I could do that. Could I do something that's kind of the opposite?
You speed up between your last target to the one you have to have.
If all else failing, if you can't get yourself in a position where when I get done with 5, 6 is immediately available, might I have to run a couple steps or whatever to get to it? Yes, 100%. What if I did the opposite, though? What if I move the same speed, but I slow down the shooting a little bit? Once again, I'm going to cover more ground while shooting the same targets, which might, again, get me further and allow me to blend those last 2 targets a little bit better, right? How would I know which one of those 2 things to try or to do? Here's how I think about it, right? Why might it be a good idea to slow down the shooting or be more careful in the shooting? If you're not getting good hits. So the question is, the way you were walking through it in the first place, were you doing that with like an engagement strategy which you would expect to give you all alphas? If the answer is yes, there's no reason to shoot more carefully, right? So the question is, try maybe walking a little bit faster to let me get to that last target sooner and see if you can shoot the same points while walking a little bit faster. If the answer is no, you're like, no, if I'm being honest, I probably had like Charlie's and maybe a Delta in there or something. Okay, don't speed up the movement then, right? You're already not hitting points. Keep moving the same pace, but be a little more careful in the shooting, right? Slow that shooting process down a little bit. And once again, you'll hopefully get more points, but you'll cover the same ground or cover more ground while shooting the same targets, and you'll be able to go straight into the last target without any delay. Is that making sense so far? Yes? Last walkthrough or 2. Again, try to tweak those things a little bit. Adjust your pace to where you can hopefully get to that last target right when you need it. I'm going to grab the pacer stuff. So, something I saw quite a bit on some of those, a couple runs regarding your first shot as well. We'll very commonly see kind of one of these 2 things. I'm not going to actually shoot for these, but off the beep, right, you'll see this as an example. Oh, that's on instant. We'll see this. So that's kind of drawing and then moving, right? I really drawed the gun. My feet were stuck to the ground like glue. Then I start moving once I get my sights. Conversely, you'll see this a lot. Right? So basically moving and then drawing, where I'm getting that first step in, then I'm kind of getting the gun out. Both of which are doing what? I mean, it's significantly delaying that time to first shot quite a bit, right? Really no reason that to be the case. I would try to do both at the same time. So the way I think about it is this. As I make this first step, right, assuming I'm going to step with the right foot, you could do it either way. But what I want to kind of see is my foot and my hand moving together in concert, right? So the right foot is obviously going to stepping forward as the hand is going to the gun. Both are moving together at the same time, right at that break in silence off the beep. So, here on, a 7-yard open target, something like that, really no reason for that time to first shot to be any different than it really would be static. So, for example, if we still got ears on, it would kind of look like this. If you just kind of watch, I would mainly watch the foot and the hand here, and hopefully you'll kind of see both move at the same time. So that was 0.69. I think it was a right Charlie, right? So I didn't super see it stuck in the middle. Could have been a 0.75 alpha, something like that. Point being, right, both move at the same time. No reason to draw the first shot to be, significantly slower just because you're now adding in that movement piece. Does that make sense? So that's a layer you could think about. Ready to hit again? Let's do it, man. I like it. Okay. So we're going to kind of make it suck way worse now. Now, you got to start on that target. So we're kind of turning it into a retrograde stage a little bit. We got to work backwards. Now, a lot of USPSA shooters, even guys who shoot competitions quite a lot, are like very afraid of working backward on stuff and kind of shooting while retreating. And I think the only reason for that is simply that we just simply don't do it. We don't do it, right? And therefore we're not comfortable with it. There is no real mechanical reason why this should be avoided. As a matter of fact, when it comes to shooting on the move while retreating, I often find that once we simply train it a little bit and get guys working on it, if anything, you end up shooting a little bit better while retreating. I think there actually is a mechanical reason for that, which is to Rocky's point, right? No matter how much you try to roll step or put that step down softly, man, when that heel strikes, it is an impact, right? And as a matter of fact, when the heel strikes the wrong angle, it's kind of a braking impact. This kind of wants to slow you down, and there's going to be some disruption in the sights. There's no give there in that heel. Versus when I reach back with the toe, and I'm backing up, there is spring in that toe, right? And so I can roll step way more effectively as I'm backing up, and it's going to be a lot softer impacts kind of while I'm retreating there, right? So if all I said was, hey, man, you got to start in this position here on this target, and then we're going to work around this way, like, you would not be wrong, you know, to go this way with it. But we're specifically trying to work backing up. So I'll ask you to kind of start, you know, hips pointing out to the right. So as we come through here, we can work backing up. Now, what I would like to avoid, obviously, for sake of time, is getting over here and having to go, you know, something like that. I don't want to have to look where I'm going, or really take that time suck around the wall, right? So if I still want to stay shooting the whole time, how will I know as I'm looking through my sights when I can actually start backing up the alley?
Your distance from where you are on how you're engaging that target right there.
The distance from where you are. What?
Your angle on the last target.
Okay, I think you're getting to the right point, right? So visual cues, right? Obviously, maintaining an awareness of where you are on the stage is often going to be very, very useful. But you can't spend your whole time on the stage going, right, looking around and actually kind of studying your position. So we have to get used to being able to seeing things either out of the periphery or even what we're shooting, your left sight picture to Rocky's point, to help us maintain awareness of where you are. So what I might say is, hey, what target am I likely to be shooting about the time that I want to start backing up? And to again, your point, probably going to be this one right here. So I could get here and say, okay, I have to be at least this far before I back up, right? Or else I'm going to be running into the wall. What does the target look like when I'm in this position? And of course, I'll notice that, you know, for me, the way I'm going to kind of think about it is, okay, I'm not only at the target, right? This would be square with the target. I've got to get literally completely past it.
Like I said, the distance from where you are.
It's not the distance from where I am, but it is my relation to the target, right? So I got to get totally past the target before I can start backing up, right? Once I've noticed that, it's just a matter of confidence, man. You have to have the confidence to say, okay, I know what that looks like. I've studied the position. I can now come through here. I can shoot, and I can simply maintain my awareness this whole time as I'm backing up with complete confidence that I am not going to run into that wall, because I know as long as I'm past that target before I start backing up, then I'm also past the wall. I've obviously set this up to be a pretty clear relation and kind of make it easy on you guys. A lot of times it's even a little bit more subtle or more difficult than that, but it's a good skill to kind of work on. In other words, using the things that you're looking at to inform you on, am I in the right position? When can I start moving? Even when you were moving forward, we talked about some guys, you know, cutting way too late when you should have cut as soon as you were past the wall and that kind of thing. Same thing here, maintaining that awareness of the stage when you're backing up, right? Now, a lot of guys really like to overcomplicate the mechanics of backing up for whatever reason, right? You'll see a lot of crazy stuff where some of you will do what they call the B-class shuffle. Or you're coming through here and you'll see guys, you know, start going this way, and you'll want to go this way, and you'll want to go this way, and you're kind of doing the little salsa dance there as you go, right? I'm simply walking, but I'm just doing it backwards now. So if the way I would come across here normally when I round the corner is to go this way, right? I'm going to do the exact same thing, but in reverse. It's the exact same thing. Just reverse direction here, right? If you want to work on the backing up mechanic, the way that you start will have a really good cue for your first movement. In other words, if I start this way, on this target, I'm probably going to go like this, right? I'm not going to be backing up. Versus if I start this way, right, and I draw, now it's way more easy to just be backing up into that movement. Does that make sense? I'll let you guys walk it here in a second. You'll come over here and look at the target, you know, make a visual cue for yourself. What does that target need to look like before I can start backing up to work on that element? And we'll kind of walk it through in reverse a couple times. Does anybody remember what my time was going forward? 36, 8?
530 something.
530 something. What's the over-under on doing it reverse?
I'm going to say it's the same.
You're going to say it's the same.
552 for you.
52, slow, so still slower. Some people are picking up on the trend here. I'm always trying to talk you guys into underestimating me here. Okay, let's see. $4.98, almost on the button. You are the prediction man. Question on any of that making sense? Okay, so what I would do when it's your turn, come up, make a mental cue for yourself here. What you're looking at, what that target needs to look like before you can back up. Right, have a good look at that. Come over here, try it. Right, without looking where you're going, just try it, dry a couple times. Make sure you're not wiping on the wall, and we'll run it. Okay, some of you may have seen this before. This is essentially a drill called Track the A-Zone from Haunted Cam. I like it a lot. We'll change it up. This is the classic use, but we'll change it up and use it a couple different ways throughout the day. But this is going to be another example of an opportunity for us to kind of use movement, again, to solve the problem of trying to stay shooting the whole time, shrink down the times on the clock when we're not collecting points. So before I run my mouth at all, let me just make a couple examples here for you. I want you to watch this and, again, kind of watch out for what you feel like we should adjust in order to improve kind of our times or efficiency here, right? We'll kind of try to figure out the best way to approach this. So here's example number 1. .524 we're starting off with. What do you think? Pretty spicy shooting, you know. We got a 13 split, 14 split, 13 split. I think 1 Charlie maybe. I don't know if we can improve on that, can we?
Yeah.
Oh, we can? How?
Standing still right there.
How so?
3, 2, 4.
Okay. What's that going to do for me?
Allow you to continue to shoot while you're moving over to get your last target on this side of the barrel.
Okay. So I can try to shoot on the move in the middle. Okay. Let's make that adjustment. .459. Took almost a second off. Maybe right about a second, I think, actually. What do you think about that?
I feel like you kind of purposely stalled here a little bit. Instead of backing
What else
out.
we done? Ah, what do you got?
You're sucked into the barrels.
Which did what? What was the problem?
You had to move your gun each time. You had to suck it back in to get it back out in position.
Okay, so that results in a .98 first transition. Right, so coming from the first target, I don't even think I explained this very well, sorry. So the rules are, obviously, you probably picked this up. First target, I have to shoot around the left side of the barrel. Last target, I have to shoot around the right side of the barrel. The 2 and 3, I can shoot anywhere in the middle. It's kind of the rules for it, right? But my transition from target 1 to target 3 there, as Rocky suggested, .98. So a full second there of bringing the gun in around the barrel, coming back to that target, right? Which is going to slow me down. I mean, that's, if I do that twice, there's 2 seconds of no shooting that's happening, which I should be able to tune that down quite a bit, right? To your point, where should I be positioned here? Couple notes you might find interesting as you kind of work through the drill. Number 1, a lot of people will want to start out here somewhere. And it's like, why? How much of the target do I need in my start position? Really just the alpha. And, you know, again, 7-8 yard open target. So, man, I'm going to get where I'm just kind of looking down the edge of this barrel, you know, kind of at the alpha, to where I just have what I need. In terms of my spacing, right? Again, no reason for me to be, you know, further away from the targets than I have to be. But also, I want to be far enough back where when I go to do my transition, I'm not going to be worried about running into the barrel, and I can just make it a direct transition from target 1 to target 3 as I come across there, right? So these will just be direct transitions. So that might look a little bit like this. .315, right? So we started at like a 560. It's a big amount of time to be able to knock off just in the space of obviously 4 targets there. The shooting didn't get faster, but we improved the time in between the shooting quite a bit. Yes, sir.
Are you wanting to use the barrel like Kim does as a vision barrier for that 3rd target? Or you're,
Well, no matter how you want to use it, I mean, it is a vision barrier. What are you asking?
so like as you position yourself, are you trying to make the barrel cover that third target to where you have to essentially look through the barrel?
It probably will be that, right? It's not something that I like harp on and like try to get you to force, in the sense of, look, if you have long arms and you're shooting an open gun and it requires you to get, this far back off the barrel to be able to clear it, and that means that I can see target 3, like, it is what it is. I'm not going to try to force you to suck up on the barrels to where you can't see it. The primary thing I'm using this for is using that movement, figuring out how do I move in such a way and set myself up in such a way that I can stay shooting the whole time. To your point, right? Obviously, the reason it's called track the A zone, no matter what you do, that last barrel is probably going to be a vision barrier. As you come to that last target, we already talked about the concept of how should I be aiming kind of through those vision barriers as I come to my last target. Obviously, if this was not a barrel, if it was, a semi-transparent wall, well, then I can see right through that wall to the target, and I can literally park my dot in the middle of the target as I come out. Bam! As soon as that wall slides out of the way, I can send that first round. Now, these are obviously not transparent, so I can't see where the target is, but I still know where the target is. As a matter of fact, I may be able to see where it is, kind of catch it in my vision right before I make that last step into position, and that'll really kind of key me in on where it is. But again, instead of, pieing the doorway, where I aim the gun around the barrel and sweep it into the target, and now I've got a timing exercise where I'm swinging the gun in and trying to shoot it as the dot races across, what I'm really trying to do is just aim my dot in the middle of where I think that target is, and then as I step out, hopefully alpha disappears behind that dot, and I can send that first shot immediately. It's not always going to be perfect. Maybe that wall will slide out of the way and my dot's, a little bit off center where it needs to be. I'll have to make a quick adjustment and shoot, right? But that'll still be way faster, than coming out and going like this or making some kind of a presentation movement after that target is already available to me. So I'm just trying to stay shooting the whole time. Yes, sir.
And another thing that I've found when I've run this before myself, like I often will find myself going to 3. I'm getting closer to those barrels, and then as I'm moving over, I'm like this. So like we were working out over there, a cue of making sure that you stay the appropriate distance for when you go from 2 to 4.
100%. I'm sure a lot of people are about to find the exact same thing. It's a very common issue that you run into for sure. So yeah, we'll work through that. Another question, right? What confirmation level should I be using here? I see 2.
1 and 2.
1 and 2. How come?
I'm going to gauge that first one as 1, 2, 2, 1.
Okay, right? So 2 of those targets, right? 1 and 4, I'm shooting standing still. 8-yard open target. Again, skill set dependent. For me, I would definitely think about that more like a confirmation 1. I can be really aggressive on that and get decent hits. Confirmation 2, target 3 and 2, as I come across the middle there, are on the move. So number 1, I'm going to consider how much time do I have to engage those, as I actually move across the middle. But then also, like, if I want to guarantee decent hits, because I'm shooting on the move now, and because I'm moving somewhat aggressively, I might transition to more of that confirmation 2 idea where I'm really reacting to the dot for every single shot, first shot and second shot on both targets, and then transitioning, react, press, to that dot coming back down to the middle. And then hopefully I'm going to land at the end, again, nice and solid. No reason, as an example, as you come into target 4 to, come out here and be doing some kind of a, that kind of a deal for target 4. That was not a personal attack, Carl. But hopefully what I'm going to be able to do is set myself up in such a way that I can come off target 2 and just go bam. Right, and now I'm back, again, static, in a good athletic stance, perfectly stable. And so then once again, there's no reason I have to go bam. I can just send 2, right, like I would kind of a confirmation 1 idea. Does that make sense? We'll work through it. We'll probably talk through a couple issues that we kind of come up with. We'll probably shoot to take lunch around 1, so we got about a half hour to kind of work on this for a little bit. If we need a little bit more time, that's fine. We'll change the drill up and add a couple things in a little bit, but we'll save those as kind of the cues for right now. We'll work just like we did yesterday, so we'll kind of split up into groups. Hop in line wherever you want to. We'll have a couple timers. Same shooter come up. Definitely run it at least 3 or 4 times, right? Work through it. Again, it will most likely be challenging to really be looking at the timers and seeing a whole lot, but if you are able to look at the timer, again, what I'm not super interested in for this is the total time, honestly. Like, that's going to be different person to person. How fast are you shooting? How fast is your draw? What's your equipment? All that kind of stuff. What's interesting for me on the timers is, like, what is your transition times around the barrel, right? So what's my time from my second shot on target 1 to my first shot on, target 3 or around the second barrel, right? Those are going to be the biggest numbers on the clock in terms of time spent not shooting, the biggest splits, if you will. And so I'm looking at those and hey man, for some reason it took me 1.15 seconds to get around that barrel. It's like, well, that's a lot of time. I can probably cut that almost in half. Let's see what I can do to figure that out, right? So if you're looking at anything on the timer, I would specifically be looking at those to your first and your last transition around the barrel to get a good idea if you're flowing well through the exercise or not. Does that make sense?
Should we switch directions or go the same direction for judging consistency?
For right now, I would definitely do it the same way several times, right? If you feel like, or if you get a chance to do multiple rounds of it and you're like, I'm crushing this, I don't know what else to try, like feel free to switch directions for sure. You can definitely do that. The mechanics will be the same, so there's not a whole lot that's necessarily new to learn there, but it's definitely worth trying for sure. Anything else? Okay, here's a timer for here. Who wants it? Here. Merry Christmas. That timer's going to be white now. Oh my goodness. So we've changed it a little bit. Obviously, we pulled the barrels apart. You getting audio? Yes. Pulled the barrels apart, but also we're changing the rules. So now you're going to start on target 1, and you got to go straight to target 4. So now, because the way the stage is set up, right, although we would like to stay shooting the whole time, we are not allowed to. We can't. There is a forced movement where I've got to get from point A to point B. And I can't be collecting points while I do it. So the focus is going to be on how can I move. Specifically, we'll be thinking about things like how do we exit the position, how do we enter a position, where we can shrink our time down on that movement. For a lot of what we do, this is going to be distinctly different than what you might learn in like athletics, as an example, where your goal is to run from one spot to the next spot quickly. Running quickly is good. However, I love Tom Castro's phrase on this. We're not running from spot to spot in the shooting sports. We're running from shot to shot. In other words, my entire goal is to shrink the split down between the two shots. So although the way I move and the athletics and all that certainly play a part, the way that I am setting myself up to where I'm ready to cover ground as soon as my last shot breaks in my first position, and the way I'm entering a position to set myself up to be ready to shoot as soon as possible are honestly usually for us way more important than what happens in the middle. We're going to nerd out on this pretty deep over the next couple hours, but I want to start basic for a couple reasons. Number one, like the basic primary principles that we're going to talk about first are like the low-hanging fruit. The way shooting kind of works a lot of times is like, okay, here's the basic principle. This is going to save you like 2 seconds. Right? Here's like the intermediate idea. That'll save you half a second. Here's the really advanced stuff. That'll save you an extra 300ths. Right? And so like all the cool stuff that we really want to focus on, like, yes, it's important, it matters, it makes a difference. That's when you've like reached a high level performance. You're looking to shave off those last few tenths or hundredths, that kind of stuff. The stuff we're going to start with, the basic ideas, that's really important. Also, I feel like I can only give you so many things to think about at one time. So we're going to start basic. I'm going to give you basically like 2 things to think about for every layer that we add. And we'll work on a couple different arrays, but for right now, we're going to keep it super basic. So I'm just going to simply, for right now, only shoot target 1 and target 4, do a basic movement. Let me just do a couple examples here for you again. You guys kind of coach me on this. Based upon what we've kind of talked about so far in terms of movement, let me know what you think we can do to maybe improve our shot-to-shot times here, okay? So here's kind of the first example. Let me do this. I'll pull this in a little bit so we're out of the muddy stuff. That's still pretty good. Okay, so here's example number 1. Starting out with a 4:03 total time, right? What do you guys notice? Talk to me.
Pretty close to the barrel, and also pretty late on having that gun up and ready
Yeah,
to shoot.
when you got that last position.
Okay, let's just make let's make that first couple adjustments you're talking about. So first thing, number 1, if I get further back, I can probably have the gun up early, coming into position there, right? So instead of having to wait until I'm totally past the barrel and now getting the gun up, right? If I'm far enough back that the muzzle can clear, I can have the gun up early as I come into position, ready to shoot, right? Let's just make that adjustment, see what that kind of does for us. 347. It's already taken close to 3/4 off with that adjustment.
You drop step, leave
Say
it.
beginning stance.
Your stance, yeah.
Okay, very good. Right, so if I start in this position, like, what am I going to do? I got the two options. I can do the kind of like lean and wait thing, try to dig out of the hole, right? Or to Rocky's point, more commonly, I can do the drop step. Rocky almost stomped on my foot earlier. I was standing behind him core, and he goes, ha! With that nice aggressive drop step. He was getting primed for this exercise. This is going to be a perfect time to work on that. It's a thing we all do, right? If you get caught, not only flat-footed, but in that, narrow stood-up stance, like, you're probably not going to be able to launch aggressively. So if I get in a different stance where I can kind of load, knees bent, feet spread apart, and I can launch a little bit more aggressively out of position, should fuel my exit quite a bit. So that would kind of look like this. .305, so about another 4.4. I think I shot that one just a touch early and actually went through the barrel, but regardless, you guys get kind of the point there, right? We're kind of, each little change that we make is shaving off some time there. So there's going to be two main points of focus for us on this first iteration of exits and entries. Number one, nice athletic start position. So some version of feet spread apart, knees bent. Everyone's going to find specific things that are useful to you. Some people are going to be like, hey, man, if I take this lead foot and actually point at my direction of travel, it's super useful. Or I want to kind of load this right leg or whatever it is. But a nice athletic base for you where you can explode aggressively out at first position. Number two, gun up early, coming into position, right, on this entry. Here's a good cue for you on that, right? I specifically want you to see your dot on the barrel before that target's available, right? This is a really good cue. You can ask yourself after the fact, did I actually see my dot on the barrel as I came across? Because there's a couple things that we'll see. Imagine I was shooting this way and I'm making an entry like this. One of the things we'll see a lot is something like this, right? Guys will come in and I'll start presenting the gun at the right time, but then it's like that at the end. So I presented the gun, I got it out, but I wasn't actually aiming. What most people will do intuitively as I go to make this entry is try to time it to where I see my target and my sights at the same time. What's the problem with this? Well, number one, if we measure time carefully enough, the way that we do in the shooting sports, that there is no such thing as at the same time. You're either seeing your sights before the target's available, or you're seeing them after, with no in between. So if I have to pick one of those, would I pick seeing my sights after the target's available? Of course not, right? I'd rather see it early. Number two, who's done a movement at all or ran into position on the stage here today or any of these exercises so far, right? And you come out to the target and the gun's out and you realize either where's my dot or, hey, my grip's all messed up. One of those two things, right? Happens on occasion. Obviously, we want to reduce the amount of times those happen. But when would you like to figure out that's a problem and start fixing it? When I'm already fully out and the target's available, or as I'm making my entry, right? So now as I'm coming in, if I get that gun up early, I'm building the grip, I'm actually finding my sight picture, making sure everything is basically perfect, all before I even could begin shooting. So that at the very first instant, that target's available, bam, I can send that first shot, right? The idea being, man, if you can send that bullet like creasing down the edge of that barrel, I demoed that like 0.02 of a second too well just a minute ago, right? But if you can send that thing like creasing down the edge of the barrel, like that's the kind of vibe we're looking for. Like I'm trying to send that bullet at the earliest possible instant that target is available. Rocky.
Could you use like a generalization for your how many steps you have until the target's available so you know you're...
I can do better than that, but not yet.
I'm sorry?
I can do better than a generalization,
Okay.
but not yet.
Okay.
I just want to focus on the basics right now, okay? Have the gun up early enough that you're seeing the dot on the barrel before the target's available. That's the main cue I want us working with right now. Being a nice athletic base where you can kind of explode out of position for that exit. Does that make sense so far? Movement playbook here, right? So you're going to notice that a lot of the real principles here are really similar to what we talked about with transitions. In terms of, number one, when you think about movement, point A to point B, where a lot of times we want to focus on is how fast you ran in the middle. Very much like with the transition, everyone wants to think about how fast the gun was moving. That's like the most important thing, the main ingredient, right? Whereas, okay, it actually turns out that's not the most important. Now, to be fair, the farther the movement is, the more your athleticism starts to matter, right? So if I got a 40-yard dash, all of a sudden, like if you're more athletic than me, my entry and exit start to matter not so much, and you're just going to outrun me, right? It's going to be a thing. However, let's think about it, okay? Whoever watches like the NFL Combine or anything, right? So what's the difference between your average like running back 40 versus your linebacker? You're looking at a difference between like an average 4.5 and like a 4.9 to 5.1. Half a second. Big difference in athleticism between those guys, I would say. Pretty fair. Difference in build, different in weight, all that kind of stuff. One of them's literally paid to run fast for a living. And you're over 40 yards, the athleticism's accounting for about half a second. Now, we're never going to move anywhere near that far, most likely, in USPSA. Correct? Like nowhere near. Like I would say our average movement, like max, 4 to 5 steps. Right? So if you're gaining half a second in 40 yards, how much time difference are you going to gain just being more athletic in 5 yards? Don't get me wrong, right? At the high levels, like is your athleticism and all that is going to start making a difference? Yeah, 100%. Like again, you're starting to polish off those tenths, hundredths of a second for sure. The low-hanging fruit, though, is going to be the entry and exit for us because we're doing short movements. And again, that what counts is not running fast; it's shot-to-shot time that really, really matters in the movement. So your technique becomes really, really important. What I will say about the traverse, I kind of think about the traverse. Like you think about driving, right? Some of you may have like made fun of your significant others or whatever in the car. Like you're in the city, you're going like one block from red light to red light, and some drivers want to go on the gas, straight to full brake, like right at the last second before the red light. And you're like, what are you doing? It's like, no, you can be easy on it. You can kind of ramp up the speed, and then you coast for a little bit, and then you slow back down, right? So if I was going to put you on like a dyno, like a car, right, a lot of our movements kind of look like that. They look like kind of a rounded ramp up, and then you kind of even out, and you kind of ramp back down. Like nice and easy, not a whole lot of aggression. The way I kind of conceptualize it is that you should be basically accelerating as hard as you possibly can until the exact moment you're braking as hard as you possibly can in order to land where you need to land. This is going to feel like a massive difference in effort for a somewhat small payoff, and it is. Like it does take a lot more effort to make this movement style how you move. And guess what? It's not that much of a difference in sense of, yeah, I gained a quarter second or whatever. But for us, that's a lot, right? Just by a little bit of effort in the middle. So effort is going to count for a lot when it comes to the traverse. We're going to start nerding out a little bit more now. We're going to start just with defining the entry piece a little bit. We already kind of talked about how important it is. Start the aiming early, get the gun up early, be ready to shoot at the earliest possible moment. We're going to now kind of really define, Rocky was starting to get towards this point earlier. Well, yeah, but how early, right? Obviously, there is such a thing as getting the gun up too early, right? Like if I'm moving from this stick to this stick, and I go like this, and I get the gun up here, and I go, like obviously I could have covered ground more quickly there, right? There was no need to have my gun up all the way over there. So at some point, we kind of need to define, okay, where is the gun going to come up, right? Let's first think about footwork. I have taken the barrels down and we've switched to fault lines. And I'm going to show you how this applies to the vision barriers as well. But the fault lines, I kind of think about like training wheels. It gives you a really specific target on the ground where your feet are going to land and helps you explore some of these concepts a little bit more easily. So let's say this is not part of the shooting area. That is, right, full gamer rules to start with. I've got to get across this stick before I can begin shooting. Right now, my whole goal is to begin shooting at the earliest possible moment I'm allowed to do so, correct? Let's assume I'm entering in on an attack target like these close paper. When, again, full game rules start with, when is the earliest possible moment I'm allowed to start shooting coming into the shooting area here?
When your lead foot stops and your follow foot is off the ground.
So when my last foot leaves the ground outside the shooting area. Okay? So that's a good principle to have in mind to begin with. Now, which way do you think is better to come into the shooting area? Would I come in, right foot first and then bring the left one behind me? Or should I come in left foot first and then bring the right foot around? Latter one, left foot first. How would I figure that out? Is there a good way to really think about that? Any tools you would use to figure out how to get into position? Kind of cheating. I've usually kind of talked about this a little bit, but we skipped a couple things. I'm going to introduce you. You're going to see how this really pays off in a little bit. I'll show you like a real good application for it. But I'm going to start talking about a concept I call reverse planning. Here's kind of the idea, right? So how'd you figure out what time you're going to set your alarm this morning? It's like, okay, class starts at 9. I want to get there by, 8:30 to load mags and stuff. It takes me this long to get there. I want to stop at the QT or the Starbucks and get a coffee on the way. It takes me this long to get up and wash my ass and all that kind of stuff when you get out of bed, right? There's what time I set my alarm. You start at your end state, right? You figure out, where do I want to land? Where do I want to arrive? And you work your way backwards to figure out how to start the process. A lot of times when you're figuring out how to come into position, if you start where you want to end up and work it backwards, it will become significantly more obvious the right way to get into position, or when to kind of start your entry, which we'll clarify in a little bit, right? So let's ask, where do I want to end up, right? I want to end up kind of in this sort of stance, right? And of course I want, again, that first shot to occur when my last foot leaves the ground outside the shooting area. So what I heard from a couple of you guys was, plant the left foot in the shooting area first, bring the right foot around, which means that my first shot on this target then would be happening somewhere right about here. Okay? What about if I try it the other way? Okay, so again, I want to come here. If I plant the right foot first and bring the left foot in behind, now that first shot is happening here somewhere, which looks like I'm setting myself up for success better. Right foot first, right? Because I'm getting that natural point of aim oriented on target, i.e. bringing the hips around and getting them square on the target about a step sooner, which is going to empower me to be ready to shoot really square, more stable on that target a little bit earlier, okay? We're going to talk about the entry here. JJ a lot of this, I got to credit JJ Ricasa, some of the phraseology and so forth. I think JJ was really one of the first to kind of create a good lexicon for us of performance movement in the shooting sports, create a really good system and some terminology for it and so forth. That's probably the most universally understood for us in the shooting sports right now. So I'm going to borrow a lot of his terminology. Obviously, all of us think about these things a little bit different, right? So I'm not claiming this is a copy and paste of what he says or anything, but I'm going to borrow some of the terminology. Definitely, like I said before, if you get a chance to train with JJ, he's an awesome guy. I'd highly recommend, right? So we're going to plan this, your entry, using that reverse planning setup to figure out what foot you want to come into the shooting area first. We call it the 3-step because the way I think about it, right? I'm going to be actually just moving. Whether I'm slowing down, braking, accelerating, whatever it is, I'm moving in my direction of travel until, in this case, that last step out to the shooting area with my left foot, which is where that pivot's really going to begin, right? So now I've planted that left foot out to the shooting area. You'll notice my foot is no longer pointing this way. It would be until now, but now it's facing downrange at the target. Why? Because this is where I'm going to begin that pivot, coming around and facing downrange. Now, for a lot of you, depending on your hip mobility and so forth, like, you may not actually be able to stand quite like this, right? However, what's going to empower you to get that foot around and pointed downrange? If I go back in the process one step, as my left foot comes and plants there, not only is my foot turning, everything else is turning. So all at the same time, I'm basically looking to that spot where I want that left foot to land. All at the same time, everything goes to the target, right? Starting with the eyes, followed by the gun, followed by the body. So here, all at once, I'm going to turn and start that presentation. That left foot plants in that spot with that foot pointing down range. Right foot comes into the shooting area. Hopefully, by the time this left foot comes off the ground, I'm ready to begin shooting right as soon as that foot basically comes off the ground. And I can basically be done shooting that target by the time both feet even land inside the shooting area, right? So I'm going to focus on that spot. We call that, I call it the plant step, right? I'm basically, every put that I put down, I'm pushing through until here, where I'm really going to plant and pivot off this last step here out to the shooting area. I'm looking at that plant spot until I get here, and now everything's going to the target at once, coming around, ready to shoot at the earliest possible moment. Everybody tracking that so far? Does that kind of make sense? I'll show you kind of a live example here
you're making sure you shoot after that foot. I
Lifts.
guess you have to if you do it that way. I was thinking like if you hit that other foot first, the impact of it, and then you're not off the ground on this side. Whereas the other one, like you impact, you're off the ground, and the rest of it, you could just be. You have to swing around, but you're also not impacting.
Not sure I'm tracking. You want to show me what you mean?
Yeah, like so if you were to come in from one side.
Yeah, I can't tell where the shooting area is. I'm not tracking what you're saying. Show me here.
So if you're coming in from this side,
Yep.
I guess your foot is already planted, so that makes sense. I was thinking the other way, just because if you hit down this way, as soon as it's planted, you can almost. The swing does feel like a lot, though. Now that I'm feeling it.
You're shooting like this.
Yeah.
Versus shooting like this.
Right.
Right? So you're still, no matter what, going to have that last foot coming into the shooting area, and at some point you're going to have to set it down. Going to be some slight disruption. So to be clear, if I come in on this entry to a 25-yard mini popper, am I likely to begin shooting before both feet are planted? No. Right? However, this entry still gets my natural point of aim squared on target a step earlier, and I feels like sets me up to be ready to shoot as soon as possible. Still, right? If I'm coming in on an attack target, even though there is that disruption going to happen when that foot sits down or whatever, can I still shoot regardless because it's an aggressive target? Yes. So it's when you start shooting is obviously going to depend on target difficulty, how well your dot lands, and so forth. But the whole concept is I'm trying to set myself up to be ready to shoot as soon as possible. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to do a quick demo here for you. What I want you to kind of watch here, honestly, if you will, just watch the feet, okay, and listen to the shooting. What you should notice is that the first shot on this target is basically going to happen right after that left foot comes off the ground, then I should basically be done shooting before it lands in the shooting area. That's like the real thing we're trying to accomplish here. So that would kind of look like this. Everybody got eyes and ears? So that would kind of, yes? Yeah, don't worry about it. Everybody ready? So it would kind of look like this. Again, watch the feet on the entry here. So now I'm done shooting that target by the time both feet actually land in the shooting area. If I had another target after that, now I'm set up and I can transition to the difficult one, right? I can kind of use that one to settle, very much like we did on the stage over here, almost like I set it up that way on purpose, right? So I can kind of set up, and now I'm on to the difficult one. But that's how I'd kind of think about this entry, right? Okay, couple key things for how I want you to set this up and work on it. Number one, where you plant that left foot is absolutely crucial. Why? If I plant slightly too early, what's going to happen now? Now my right foot lands here. Now what do? Right, I either land and I'm doing this deal, or I'm now taking extra steps inside of the shooting area when I could already be stable in shooting, right? What happens if I stomp or plant too late? Nothing really. If I plant a little bit too late, it's okay. I still land and I land here, right? I'm shooting a little bit later than I could have, but the consequences are not quite as dire as stomping too early. How far out you plant, though, is not universal spacing. It's going to be different for everyone, depending on how low you're getting in. Right? If I come in nice and tall, I can only step too far. Again, if I come in nice and low, I can step way farther. So how low are you coming in? How tall are you? All of that's going to impact, obviously, how big your steps are. So you've got to figure out where that spot is for you. How do I figure that out? Again, reverse planning is really good. So when you're the shooter, right, what I want you to do is come up and reverse plan it. We're going to use these cones to help you as a vision aid for this. So you're going to come and get in the shooting area, right? You're going to kind of show me what is the stance that I want to have when I land here, right? Now with my gun out, if I step out with the left foot, that's probably about where I want that plant step to happen. Right? I'm doing it backwards. I'm going to put my cone right in front of where that foot landed. As I exit this, where am I going to look? To that spot. Not to the fault line. Not to where I'm going to land. To where I'm going to begin the entry. That's what I'm timing, is where I'm going to start the entry. So I'm going to look to that spot. And as I come out of here, I may have to kind of meter my steps a little bit as I'm braking to make sure my left foot lands in that position. So you might see like some stutter steps, something as I come in, right, to make sure the feet actually land in that right spot. But you're going to get used to looking there and judging how do I get my left foot to actually land in the right spot. as I come in to really kind of time and optimize that entry. Right? So each shooter is going to have to reverse plan that and figure out how far out you're going to step. Most of you, right, are not standing nearly as low as I do, which is okay, right? Point being, yours is probably going to be closer to that. That's fine. If you reverse plan it and say, man, I think I need my cone there, that's okay. Don't be afraid of planting too close to the fault line. Again, the consequences of planting a little bit too late are very minor. The consequences of planting too early are way higher, right? So if anything, err getting a little bit too close. That's okay. But just figure out that kind of optimal spacing for you. Make sense? Last thing really quick before I let you guys get to work. Hey man, this is like super gamer stuff. Does this matter to real world or like vision barriers at all? It does. Matter of fact, it applies exactly the same way. Here's the deal. If I'm coming around the corner of my vision barrier now onto the target, I still want to be ready to shoot as soon as the target's available, right? Okay, so I know I want to land here, ready to shoot. Again, how would I rather come into position here? Would I rather come in like that, or would I rather come in like that? Same concept, right? So even on vision barriers, even if it's an entry, not something specific on the ground, but hey, I know there's a spot in the middle of a stage that I need to stop at to shoot a target, like as far away or through a porch or whatever. To me, this is one entry that I would use for pretty much any situation in practical shooting. So even if it's a vision barrier, I'm still going to find that spot, come in and go just like I would if it was a fault line. Again, the fault line is training wheels. It gives you a really specific target on the ground to look at, and it makes it really easy to assess what you're doing, but it applies everywhere. Does that make sense? Very good. Again, same shooter can come up, run it a few times, work through it. Highly recommend you try this one dry, right? Again, you can only think about so many things at a time, so really think about the footwork a couple times. If you want to then do it dry with the gun, that's cool. If you want to then work it in with some live fire, that's cool also. If you want to walk it in slow motion, that's very cool also. Whatever you need to do. Make sense? Okay, kind of looking at our notes here, right? 3-step entry, couple things. Number one, when I'm figuring out how to come in, that reverse entry is absolutely key for figuring out how to get into position, because a lot of times, like which foot you should plant with and so forth is going to be significantly less obvious than this kind of like very clear-cut lateral movement situation. As an example, let's say maybe I'm coming from where Carl is, and I've got to get across, let's say, this fault line in order to shoot that first paper over there. If Carl's my shooter, what foot should he be planting with? What's the last foot he should plant with outside the shooting area? How would he figure that out?
By doing it
Malik,
backwards.
Malik, thank you for volunteering, sir. Would you mind showing us? So here's what it looks like. I want you guys to watch. I don't want to show you, right? I want you to figure it out. So Malik, show us what's the stance you want to end up with if you were shooting that paper. Okay, very good. Now what I want you to watch is primarily the hips. So if you step out with your right foot, what happens to the hips? Not a whole lot, right? Still square. What if it does the same thing with the left? You see how it's kind of wanting to pull more this way, right? Off of the target. So that's basically what I'm looking at. Which one is kind of setting me up better? So keep in mind, you're coming from over here. So you'd be stepping back this way. So what I would kind of think about is like, okay, from here, if I'm shooting this way, if I step back this way, right, hips are still good. If I step back with my left foot, still that pulls the hips this way. I'm like, oh, I don't like that so much. Okay, very good. Now I know, okay, there's about where my plant step's going to be. Right foot right there. So as I come in, I now know that's where I'm going to plant. I'm going to kind of come in, stutter step, right? And I end up in my spot, right? So if you're not sure how to enter into a position, some version of that reverse planning, right? Figure out where do I want to end up, do that entry backwards. A lot of times it will become way more obvious how you should get into position, right? Any questions so far on the 3-step entry? All that making sense? Okay, so we're going to reverse plan, and then again, for that plant spot, or that stomp step, like JJ calls it, super, super crucial that I look to that spot. It's so funny, right? We talk about vision all the time for things like shooting, recoil control, target transitions, all that stuff. Crucial for movement also, right? Crucial for movement. Just like you don't know where the gun's going to go if you're not looking there, you don't really know where your feet are going to go if you're not looking there either. So when I'm just doing a movement, there's no shooting to be doing, I can really use my eyes to optimize that movement. Now, so far, we've been using the training wheels of the cones to really give you a super clear indicator of where you're supposed to look and where you're supposed to plant that step. As we start thinking about the exits, we're going to keep doing 3-step entries. If you feel like you still need the cone, if you're having troubles figuring out where to plant, keep using the cone. No issue whatsoever. If you feel like you're crushing that pretty well, go ahead and get rid of that bad boy. And now you're going to have to figure out, okay, at a certain spot, I got to figure out how to know where I'm going to plant without the cone, obviously. In the case of coming in on a fault line like this, it may be as simple as a quick glance to the fault line and knowing what my spacing is to pull my vision back about a foot. And now I know, okay, there's where that plant step's going to happen. And I know that spacing for me to come into the shooting area. In some cases, if I'm coming into a nondescript location where there's not a fault line or whatever, I may just really be looking, try to find something on the ground. Hey man, there's kind of like a little dead spot in the grass right there. That's about where I want to step, is right there. So I'm going to plant, on that dead spot, and that'll line me up for where I want to land. Right? I'm just going to try to pick up on visual cues in the ground that'll help me figure out where I want to come into position. But it's not going to be, obviously, a super high contrast cone in the grass that you can lock your vision on. So you can start working on that piece. Cool? Let's now start thinking about our exits. We obviously, probably one of the very first things we talked about yesterday is how a lot of people have that habit of basically drop stepping out of every position, and how there's built-in inefficiency there because the clock is running while I'm basically lowering my center of gravity and stepping opposite the direction that I want to go. But can we think of any situations where that would actually be appropriate or the proper way to exit out of a position?
Hard leans.
Why?
I mean, if you're already over there, it's going to take a long time to try to push yourself back when it would be easier just to put that foot in the ground and go.
Yeah, so the rule that I'll kind of put down for drop steps here, the only time we would ever intentionally use a drop step is for what I'll call a non-athletic start only. A non-athletic start position. So, a couple examples like this, right? So you're bringing up the situation of a hard lean, 100%. So if this is my fault line and I'm leaning around a wall, shooting my target, and now I have to go that way, right? I could, of course, just try to dig out of the position and get out of here and move to my right. Or might it actually be more explosive as I come out of here and go 1-2 to stab that left foot down now out of the shooting area so I have better leverage to push and go in the opposite direction? What about, hey man, standing, erect, toes on marks, like a normal IBSIC start position, and the feet are super close together, right? I'm being forced into a non-athletic start position. Now, to be fair, okay, if Malik's my first target, right, and it's available right off, can I just step in and draw and shoot? Yes. What if I have to run where he is, though, off of this start position? Might I be better off going, dropping that foot to be a little bit more explosive coming out of that position? I would suggest yes, might be appropriate. There is 2 variances of the drop step that I'll mention to you that may be appropriate in a couple different situations. I'm going to borrow some terminology from jiu-jitsu for this, single versus double leg, right? So the single leg is your classic. So if this is my fault line, I'm leaned here, it's going to be I'm drop stepping with just that 1 foot to get leverage to push off in the opposite direction. This should not look like a jump. So in other words, what this shouldn't look like is I'm coming in on a lean and you see a guy go, and now I'm pushing, right? This is a little bit of an athletic movement. And so if the jump is like the most athletic version of it you can make it, it's probably not going to be worth it time-wise because it's going to take so much time. You're probably better off just doing the old, like I mentioned before, if I'm leaning here, I'm just going to kind of dig back out and push. You're probably better off that way if it has to kind of look like a jump for you. But if you can, keep the shoulders at the same level as I'm coming out and just stab that foot down as I push out, that may help you be more explosive there. Single leg drop step. That would be the default as well, again, for like the toes on mark situation, where I would just stab that rear foot back, kind of a plyo step there to push off of and get myself started. the double leg, right? Where I would kind of drop step with both legs. This would kind of be appropriate in a couple situations. Number one, an extremely aggressive lean. This would be a situation where I'm leaning like so far, right, that maybe my offside foot is now even no longer on the ground. It's kind of up in the air as I'm really struggling to get that angle. Or in a situation where I'm worried about traction out here. In other words, if I come down and I stab that foot, I'm worried it's not going to stick because there's loose gravel or mud or whatever, and I'm worried that foot is just going to blow out. I'm going to wipe out on the ground. I could, in that situation, utilize what I would call a double leg drop step, where now instead of stabbing just the one foot down, as I really come out of position, I'll kind of drop step with both feet at the same time, and now I've got a foot underneath of me, so that even if this foot goes, I don't really wipe out because I've got that support underneath, and I can recover and still get out of position. But ideally, I can just launch, and presuming it does stick, and immediately be out of that position, even with that double leg drop step. All that makes sense so far. Okay. Yes, sir.
Heels on marks is doing a single leg takeoff.
Yeah, I mean, the drop step, again, would be appropriate for any kind of non-athletic start position where I need an explosive exit. In the event that it's heels on marks, like against a fault line, now I've actually got a real advantage in the sense of I can probably use that fault line as extra traction to really push off of, right? So you could do that. Or, if it's a shallow fault line and I feel like I need to step back farther, can I reach back behind that and push? Sure, 100%, right? That answer that question? Yes? Anything else on that? Okay. For many of you that are here today, I encourage you to start watching your shooting footage and your match footage and so forth and looking for those drop steps, and you will be seeing them probably over and over again in a lot of places where you don't even realize you're doing them, and just that awareness will help you kill that habit where you shouldn't be using them, but on occasion, you might plan to do it on purpose, again, for those non-athletic starts, aggressive leans, that sort of thing. Right? Now, let's assume that this is not a factor. I'm just standing in the shooting area. Once I'm done shooting, I'm going to launch and go across to the other direction. Can we think of pros and cons here between a couple different styles of exits, right? So my two options in terms of primarily which foot I'd come out of the position first with, I could do what we'd call a lead foot pivot, where my lead foot, the foot that's closest to my destination, is going to come out of the shooting area first and pivot right in my direction of travel. Or I could do that crossover where I'm bringing that trailing foot across and launching off of it that way. Pros and cons, can we think of any? What should I do there?
Well, the pro of the going to the right is that your right foot is already leading towards that angle. So that way your hips are also in that direction if you're going to the right. You just inject over to the right.
Yeah, so I think what you're getting at there, are you saying that would make it more explosive of an exit?
Correct, and then you're not really like crossing anything with the left. If you're going to the right, you're already here.
Okay, let's bookmark that. We'll come back to it if you don't mind. Any other pros and cons you can think of? No? Okay. A couple things to think about. Number one thing I'll think about, how far am I going? Why? If I'm only going 2 to 3 steps, right? We've talked with a couple of you about like, hey, where is it worth actually breaking your grip and that kind of thing, right? We now know about the 3-step entry, which means I'm really starting that presentation about 3.5 to 4 steps before I'm actually fully into the shooting area, which means if I'm only moving around 3 steps, is there any reason to break my grip on that movement? No, because it's immediately time to get that gun back up on the entry. If I'm moving 5 to 6 steps, might it now be worth it to break my grip for a couple steps where I can really just focus on that explosive movement for a couple steps and then rebuild that grip on the entry? Yeah, maybe, right? If I'm only going a really short distance though, let's say 2 to 3 steps, one of the significant advantages of that lead foot pivot when I think about the hip orientation is that I can maintain my hips downrange. So I'm only going 2 to 3 steps. I may not unmount the gun even fully, break the grip. I can just come up with that right foot and and really basically maintain my orientation downrange the whole time, coming out with that right foot. Versus what does the crossover tend to do? It tends to pull my hips more in my direction of travel, which is fine for a full send longer distance movement, but it's going to tend to pull, again, my natural point of aim off downrange and over more towards my direction of travel, right? So some pros and cons there. I'll also think about my last target position. So in other words, if my last target is John, and I'm going to feel very comfortable doing a crossover coming out of position, right? If it's Morgan, that's going to be more strange, right? So I may be better off coming out with that lead foot pivot. I'll also think about my weight distribution. In other words, maybe I have a little bit of a lean, not enough that it requires a drop step necessarily, but it's enough that my one leg is loaded when I'm getting ready to come out of position. Maybe because I have to see around to get a target or whatever the case may be. Now, if this leg is loaded, how easy is it going to be for me right now to pick this up off the ground and put it over there? A little bit tricky, right? So I'm probably set up more for that crossover when that right foot is loaded and vice versa. You're like, well, obviously, what does all this matter? Well, if there's a particular exit, we're going to think about a couple other things here in a second. If there's a particular exit that I want to use, either a lead foot pivot or a crossover, and I realize, hey, if I clear this array in this fashion, it's going to result in me being loaded over here. Maybe I'll choose to do the array in a different order. You know, I come in on this target first, and I go 1, 2, and then I go 3, 4, 5, 6, and now I'm not loaded. And now I can exit the way that I want because that's a two-step movement, and I really want to do that lead foot pivot or whatever the case may be, right? But those are kind of the three variables that I'll really think about. So first of all, distance. I'm going to think about all three of these, whether it is a crossover or a lead foot pivot. Distance, if it's a really short distance, strongly prefer lead foot pivot. We mostly do short distances in USPSA, which makes our lead foot pivot kind of the default, right? Now, you bring up a point with regards to explosiveness, right? I think the sports science guys, for the most part, would probably agree with you that the lead foot pivot is actually, when executed properly, the most explosive as well in terms of that exit, right? However, we're not working with pro athletes, and a lot of top-level shooters feel the opposite. They actually prefer that crossover on the longer full send movements, right? If I'm really going to full send a movement, they prefer to come across that left foot and bam, launch off of that left foot, and they feel like it helps them get out of the hole a little bit more aggressively. If it works, it works, right? But I'll leave that up to you to kind of experiment with, right? But those are kind of the three main things that I would think about when I'm picking between lead foot pivot versus crossover, okay? Now, here's the fun part. We have a variable, or a variance, rather, of both of the lead foot pivot and the crossover, which I'll call leans. Leaning exit, okay? What I mean by leaning exit is I'm going to start moving, start stepping, if you will, actually before I'm done shooting, okay? So here's my fault line. Obviously, what I can't do as I shoot my target is shoot after this foot touches the ground. But can I, if I'm shooting Rocky, come out of position here, right? Be going 1, 2 as I work my way out of that position where I'm starting to step a little bit before I'm done shooting that last target. Yes. And in which case, if I can do that, then I'm a full step ahead of everybody else that didn't do that, basically, right? I'm starting that movement a good bit early. I can do this either with the lead foot pivot, right? Coming out the lead foot, bam. So in other words, in this case, I would go like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Exiting with that left foot. Or I could do it as a crossover, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 as I come out. Pros and cons of these two, again, would be the same. So I can do a leaning lead foot pivot, i.e. start the lead foot pivot before I'm done shooting. Or I could do a leaning crossover. Start that crossover before I'm done shooting. Which one do I use? Well, again, I'm going to think about how far am I going? What's my last target position? How's my weight distributed? Right? But also, here's kind of an extra little thing to think about. When I go to do the leading lead foot pivot, so I'm going to shoot and I'm going to go ba-ba as I step out of position. Man, when that right foot comes off the ground, I am committed. Like it is coming back down, and there is nothing I can do to stop it in the event that I have a little bit of trigger freeze, or the dot doesn't land exactly where I want it to, or whatever, right? Versus if I go to do that crossover, to be honest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can actually kind of pause halfway in the middle of that if I need to, and be pretty stable and get a lot of work done, right? So that it's a little bit safer in that regard when it comes to leaning crossover. And so if you've got kind of an intermediate difficulty target, I might kind of prefer that crossover just because I'm a little bit more stable here, especially if my last target position is more in this direction, and I can kind of get some work done as I'm leaning out of position and still get the momentum going and be kind of a step ahead there on the exit, right? Now, last target difficulty leads us to the 2 rules for leans, right? Number 1, first rule. Attack target only. In other words, if we remember the definition of attack target, right, I can guarantee the hits. So that would be the only kind of target that I would want to do a leaning exit on. Imagine I have a 15-yard mini popper, and I go to step out, and I go, bam, bam, foot touches. Like, oh, crap. Ding, right? That's a lot of risk going on there, because I'm going to have to come back into the shooting area, risk a foot fault, risk a mic, whatever the case may be. So I would only want to do that leaning exit on a target where I can guarantee the hits, probably, right? Also, here's the question. When would I start my exit? In other words, let's say I've got a piece of paper, piece of steel, attack target that I'm going to exit on, right? That I'm going to shoot my last array. When would I start the exit? In other words, when would my first foot come off the ground as I'm shooting? When would I actually start that movement? So in between the first and second round on the last target, you're saying?
Right after you press the second round.
Well, that's exiting after I'm done shooting then, which is not a leaning exit at all. The whole point of a leaning exit is to start moving before I'm done shooting, right? So in other words, I'm going to be shooting bop, bop as I come out. So the question is, when does that foot come up? When do I start? Which one? What do you mean when it comes into sight?
Well, I'm saying when you get a visual on it, basically.
I have a visual on it right now. I'm saying if I'm standing here still, and I'm shooting an array of targets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm shooting paper, steel, paper, I can see all the targets the whole time.
So I would assume after you shoot that still, and then
Okay,
as you move to the attack target, then you start.
I agree 100%. I like this a lot.
Shoot still, right?
I like it, right? So what we'll say is we'll start during the last transition.
Okay, start to make it.
So as the gun, in this case, I'm doing a steel to paper transition, then I'm leaving. As the gun comes from steel to paper, my foot starts that movement also. So ding, dot, dot, right? As I kind of come off there. I'm starting during the last transition. What most people will try to do intuitively, and the number one answer that I get is what I thought you were getting at, I don't think it was, is you're going to start while you're shooting at the last target. In other words, like sort of in between that split. So in between shot 1 and 2 on your final target, you'll start that movement. I have 2 major problems with that. Number 1, again, we would only use a leaning exit on what kind of target? Attack target. So therefore, if I assume it's an attack target, what's that last split going to look like?
Like high teens, low 20s.
Let's call it a 15. How much time in the middle of a 15 split do I have to go somewhere? Not much. So we're not really accomplishing anything, number 1, right? Number 2, it's an attack target, which means what confirmation level am I likely using? 1, which requires the gun to be behaving how? Predictably. And you're telling me what I'm going to do is get the gun over here, and I'm going to fire that shot, I'm going to go bam, and then as the gun's recoil, I'm going to go and hope the gun comes back to the right spot. Probably not going to work. So we would lift the foot during the last transition so that I can go 1, 2, 3, right, as I'm kind of coming out of position there. All that making sense so far? Yes, sir.
Does, when you were talking about, depending on what leg you're going to lean with and like what it's doing to your body, do you feel that one way or the other will have a greater chance of dragging off a target?
No. Not so much, right? And that's an individual mechanic. That's either resulting in either as a result of vision, right, or you're simply not returning the gun to the right spot. You know, you instead of as I'm moving, either with the right foot or the left foot, instead of tracking, I'm dragging the gun across. I can do that with either foot very easily, right? So I wouldn't say it's particularly related to what foot you're moving with. That's a kind of a separate issue. Anything else on that? Obviously, a bit of a fire hose of information. A lot of things to think about. A lot of nerdy little details. I'm about to try to kind of demonstrate the kind of time differences that we're going to see with each one of these little changes we've talked about over the last hour or two. What you're going to find, again, the low-hanging fruit. Like, honestly, some of us here today are not really ready yet for this stuff to, like, pay off a whole lot. Again, the low-hanging fruit that's going to make a massive difference for you is, like, the stuff of, hey, athletic base, be ready to leave as soon as you're done shooting, have the gun up early as you come into position. Like, that's the big stuff. That's the important stuff I should really be focusing on. Like, once we've gotten those kind of concepts down, if I start focusing on the footwork, can I kind of like polish off those last couple tenths or hundredths and really kind of super optimize some stuff there? I tend to think so, yes, right? But again, master those main kind of principles to begin with, and then we'll kind of fully optimize. I think I need to move this piece of steel really quickly. I'll explain why that's important in a second. And how we're going to train this. But let me make just a couple examples here for you really quickly. I'm going to start with the worst movement I can. Now, what I want to do, again, we're going to get like really granular here in terms of like small gains. So I'm going to try to eliminate every variable that I can. So I'm going to take the draw out of it and so forth for the sake of these demos. So I have like no bias and I can't really screw up the times. I'm going to start with my gun already out, dot on target, ready to shoot. In order to make it make sense though, every time over here, I'm going to have to shoot steel and then paper. And then I'm going to run across, come in, shoot on the paper. Do that every time. I'm going to start with the least efficient version, which is going to be nice and tall, into a drop step, and then I'm going to not do a 3-step entry over here. I'm going to come into the shooting area left foot first, bring the hips around, and then kind of shoot, and we'll see what time that kind of gives us to start with as a baseline. That would kind of look like this. Okay, so we're starting with a 275. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the drop step. Not fix the base over here yet. Stay nice and tall, but go into a 3-step entry. Let's see what that does for us. .263, took just over a tenth off by really improving that entry. Let's now get a nice aggressive base. We'll go from steel to paper and explode out of here more aggressively, hopefully. Again, into a 3-step entry. Down to a 239, taking a few more tenths off. We'll now go to a leaning exit. So I'll go from steel to paper. As I do that, I'm going to go into that leaning lead foot pivot, start that entry a little bit earlier. Again, into a 3-step entry on the far side. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm literally short 1 bullet. Sorry, stand by. Oh, my man. Thank you. You're going to hear a funny change in pace about halfway through here. Okay, so here this kind of looks like. Well, we'll add a split. 205, add a 15 to that. We're at a 220. Had a little bit of trigger freeze there, right? So every kind of little change that we make is taken off, up to a quarter second at a time, but at least a tenth or two. Seems insignificant until you stack all of them together. And now we've gone down to a 220 from what, a 280 something? 275, right? So taking a little bit over half a second off, right here on this little like 4-step movement with a total of 5 shots fired. Does that kind of make sense? So, again, we're really polishing and optimizing little bits, stack it all together. It's going to be a meaningful amount of time, particularly if you think about, multiple movements per stage, 3 to 4, right now all of a sudden you're polishing off, multiple seconds potentially on a stage by being really intentional with your movement mechanics as you go, right? Now, again, every time you move, into 3-step entry. We'll do captain's choice on the exit, right? So when you come up, we're not gonna have time to work through all this stuff, but you can pick which exit you want to use. You gotta tell the guy running the timer though, and we'll see if you actually do it. Okay, now here's kind of the rules, right? We're gonna make the context make sense depending on which exit you want to try. So if you say, I want to try a drop step, we're not gonna bother putting up a wall or whatever, but you can go ahead and induce that lean. Right? I pretend there's a wall there, kind of lean out. It doesn't really matter what you shoot. You can shoot all the targets. One of the targets doesn't matter, but you're gonna lean, shoot something, exit off that drop step into your 3-step entry, right? If I say, hey, I'm gonna do a static exit, right? The lead pivot or the crossover, but I'm not gonna start it until I'm done shooting, right? So not a lean, static lead pivot or a crossover. Why would I do that? Well, I do it because I'm not leaving on an attack target. I'm leaving on a control. So I'll draw to one of the papers, and then I'm going to leave off the steel, which means I'm going to have to stay really stable until I guarantee that round on steel, and then leave. And I'll do my leave a pivot or my crossover. If you say, hey, I want to do a leaning lead foot pivot, transition to the paper and leave during that last transition, right? Come to the steel, bing, ba ba, right? I'll start that step as I'm transitioning from that steel to that last attack target. Does all that make sense? Maybe? If you need me, flag me down. We'll come talk about it. Again, feel free to work on any of this dry that you kind of want to. Figure out what you want to do. But the whole idea is I want you to have the ability to come up, decide based upon context what exit you want to use, and then actually exit the way that you intended to. Right? That's kind of the main thing we're working on. So come up, pick one of the exits you want to try, tell your buddy, run it. We'll see if you actually do it. If you need help, let me know. So we've talked about a lot today, obviously, right? So we started off this morning filling out the 7-step checklist, things we already talked about. We talked about we need to start with figuring out where are the targets, checking that round count, making sure we're not shooting anything twice, but we're also getting everything. Where are my 4 shooting positions? I'm thinking about those in terms of zones. What's the most efficient path through those 4 shooting positions as determined by steps taken while not shooting? Double check, where am I going to reload, right? Again, don't be afraid to reload twice if you need to. Confirmation levels, picking a confirmation level for every single target, and also picking spots on targets that I'm going to aim at specifically where it is necessary. Now I'm going to put step number 6, opportunities for aggressive movement. Again, I kind of mentioned this earlier, a lot of people are going to get on the stage and almost try to look for a plan that doesn't require you to shoot on the move. It doesn't require you to move aggressively and that sort of thing. Hopefully we've seen today how much time you can save on things through these aggressive movement techniques. So the main things we're talking about here, things we're looking for, opportunities to shoot on the move, shooting in and out of position, if not just, the long form movement like we did kind of on the L drill up there earlier, shooting on the move, as well as the leaning exits. Leaning exits, right? And I'll also plan out as a part of this my 3-step entries. So if I'm going to do a 3-step entry somewhere, there's a hard entry, right? I'm not shooting my way into position, but I've got to get to a specific spot where I'm going to begin shooting. I'll reverse plan it. I'll think about where that plant step is going to happen, make sure I have that planned out in a granular fashion so that I know where and how I'm coming into position. Let's kind of look at the stage real quick, and we'll kind of really clarify some of our specific movement plans for this stage. Let's assume we're sticking with the same plan that we kind of talked about before. So here I am in my start position. I'm essentially going to do an exit now, if you will, into my first shooting position. What should this exit look like? Like, what foot do you think I should step into the shooting area with first? Right? Left? Crossover? Why? What's the pros and cons? Why does it really matter?
You have that right foot right where you want it to be to shoot those 2 targets.
Okay.
I say left.
Why?
By the steps that you take, you're not taking as many steps. You know what I'm saying? Because you're like.
I think I see where you're going. So the question is, how far am I going to get? If I only take 1 step, if I step with my right foot, I get to about here. if I step with my left foot, I get a little bit farther, right? Significantly farther. So now, if I don't have to get very far, if I only step, if I step with that right foot, bam, and that target's available to me and I can shoot from here. Might that be technically my quickest time to first shot if I have a lightning quick draw? Yeah, maybe, right? But if I'm not out far enough and I step with that right foot, so someone said, I may have to take extra steps down. I'm gonna come in, not be far enough, and I'm gonna have to take like a whole extra kind of stutter step to get deep enough for exposure on that target. So what I kind of observed this morning coming into position here is like, man, to actually get the exposure on that target that I need, I'm probably going to load this right foot in my start position, step into the left foot, then put that right foot down so that I have the full A zone available to me on that first target, and I can now push off of that right foot as I'm shooting that right target into my exit. Based on what we've talked about today, what kind of exit am I going to use here? What would that look like?
Probably gonna use a crossover. No, lean because it's an attack target.
Sort of, right? So partially, this is going to just be a bit of a semantical argument. Obviously, I want to kind of shoot out on that target if I can. Now, the question is going to be how fast are you going to shoot it, right? So in other words, if I come in here like this and I go da-da-da-da, right, it'll kind of look like a leaning exit to your point, right? Where basically I'm not really like walking as I'm shooting that target. I'm just kind of maybe like shooting this one and then I kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Basically a leaning exit as I kind of step out of that position. If you're going to have to shoot it a little bit slower, it might just look like shooting on the move. Like I'm shooting my way out of position. I might come in here and I might go, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If you have to be a little bit more careful on that target, right? So it could be either one depending on how fast you're shooting. But regardless, I at least want to try to get my momentum going out of that position as I'm transitioning and shooting that target to the right, okay? Now, what am I going to do over here? What's this entry going to look like? Shoot my way in on that left target, right? So here's the important question. Where do I start shooting that target?
As soon as it becomes available.
It's available here.
Right.
It's available here. Should I shoot it from here?
Yeah, but then after you shoot it, you still have to get all the way there without shooting.
Yeah, so if I do that, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to go 5, 6, have to break the gun down and run farther towards it to now shoot that target. Does that seem like the best plan?
About with just enough time so that you're ready for the next one.
I would say the edge of the double to that stick.
So to your point, right, I basically by the time I get done shooting that target, the next target should be becoming available because by the time I start shooting that array, I don't really want to have to stop again. I don't want to turn it into multiple movements, right? So if I can't stay shooting the whole time, which is a little bit too much space to stay shooting the whole time, if I'm going to have to run a little bit, I'm going to basically run until when I start shooting, I can finish shooting that array all in kind of one pass, right? The question is, exactly where does that happen? How do I know exactly where to start shooting?
Reverse it.
My man, I was so hoping someone would come up with this. Okay, so this is where reverse planning is so clutch, right? And then this is where I will use it on stages all the time. We would call this kind of a soft entry, right? Where I'm shooting my way into position. And how do I know where to start my soft entries? Well, I can figure out where do I want to finish the array. Okay, where's my next position? I know that I'm going up to this front left corner. So where am I going to exit the shooting area here? Probably right about here. I'm going to be exiting the shooting area to go up here to the front left corner. So I could take my last shot on this array from about right here if I want to. So maybe I'll think about it. Hey, I'm going to finish in the head box, let's say, and I'm going to back out. So I'll think about, okay, if I come here, I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bam. Okay, that's about how much space it took me to shoot that array. So that was I want my first shot happening about there. Now I can try it in the forward direction and see how it works. So if I come out of here, I can go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like my timing worked out pretty good. So I can test it just to double check. But reverse planning will kind of give me a really good idea of how much space I can cover while shooting those 3 targets, one right after another, which will tell me a good place to start shooting on those targets, right? Now, again, once I've planned that, if I want my first shot to happen here, where does the gun need to be up?
Over here.
Just a step or two ahead of time. right? A little bit early, which means you start looking at it. If I want the gun up here, how far am I running? Not much. It's a couple steps, you know. So as I come in here, I'm going to kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? I'm coming right into it. I don't have to break the gun down for very long. Again, think back to our goal statement for stage planning, trying to spend the least amount of time not shooting possible. How easy would it be, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but how many of you think your movement this morning looked more like coming in here and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And we spent all this time no shooting, right? Versus if my split looks more like coming from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Man, how much time was there in between that shooting right there? Almost nothing, right? We've just cut, multiple seconds potentially out of a movement like that, but it's really paying attention to what I want this movement to look like across the back here. Does that kind of make sense?
Would you even break your grip there?
If you do, it's going to be like a step.
Right.
So I wouldn't say universally right or wrong.
So would this be one of those situations where you can kind of use that punch in to...
Definitely. Right? It's essentially a super wide transition, and it's at least a couple steps of aggressive movement. I would definitely not, for me, try to leave the gun out, and come out of here and go. Like, it's not going to be that. It's going to be bringing the gun in and bringing it across aggressively, right? Cool. Okay, so I'm going to finish shooting that about up here by the fault line. What kind of exit out of the shooting area am I going to use?
Probably a drop step forward, right?
Why would I drop step? Am I going to be in a non-athletic start position?
No.
Lean. Okay, what's the rule on leans, though? When do I use leans? Tack target only.
Oh.
What target am I going to be leaving on?
Control.
Well, let's do what target? The head box, right? Now, to be fair, it's a head box, but it is at 4 yards, maybe? Is a 6-inch target, a 6-inch square target at 4 yards, an attack target for you? Again, these are not universal rules. That's a decision you have to make.
If it was hard cover and not a no-shoot.
Okay, fair, right? Great point. What's the risk factor? Okay, what's the risk factor? I 100% did a leading exit on that target this morning, and I would do it again because I feel very confident with that. Okay, matter of fact, I'm 99% sure I shot 2 alpha on it doing a leading exit, right? But is that the right just call for everybody? Maybe not. So based upon the risk factor there, I would have to think about that. You'll remember we talked about yesterday, like where is it worth it to shoot Charlies? So this is where I'm starting to think, okay, yes, if I do a leaning exit out of here, I might save a quarter second, but let's say I think I'm definitely risking a Charlie if I do that. But again, I'm definitely saving a big chunk of time. So is it worth it? Again, I'm going to think about the hit factor of the stage, all that kind of stuff is things that are going to be going through my head on it, right? Again, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I really think I can do a leaning exit at 4 yards and probably still get 2 alphas. So I'm definitely going to do it, right? It's the kind of stuff I'm thinking through. But think about what kind of exit that I want to do there, right? Entry up into the front corner. What's that going to look like? What's the entry I'm going to use? What's the entry, though? What's it called? 3-step entry. Very good. But I'm going to use reverse planning to figure out which foot I'm going to plant with and where, right? So I know I'm coming in from this kind of an angle up here into the front left corner, and I'm coming in on what target? This one. So here I am. Here's where I know my end state's going to be. If I come back with the right foot, how do my hips look? Good, right? What about if I come back with the left foot? Not so much. So now I know I come back with the right foot. Okay, I'm going to step back. Bam. Right about there is where I want that plant step to happen. So I'm going to look to that spot. Just so happens, man, there's a nice little double orange mark on that fault line right there for me to look at. That's convenient. Okay, so I'll step off that a little bit. As I come out of this corner, I'll kind of look to that spot. I'm going to kind of come in with that right foot. As the right foot comes off the ground to that plant step, gun is now going to come up. Bam, seeing my dot in the middle of the A zone as the left foot lands. Now the right foot comes off the ground. Bam, bam. As it lands, I'm done shooting that target by the time both feet are even fully in the shooting area. right? All this is kind of shooting on the move, right? Basically just shooting on the move. So we don't have to plan it out in a super granular fashion. We're just going to try to keep the feet basically moving, stay stable as we really engage those targets and kind of move across the front. Really what I'm going to have to pay attention to is a couple things. As the confirmation level of my targets change, the throttle control is going to come into play. So when I have a more aggressive target, like say the middle target right here, maybe a 10-yard open target, I'm going to say, hey, I can move on that a little bit more aggressively. So I'll go that 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I've got the steel. So I'm going to think about, hey, I probably need to pause right on steel. Again, I'm going to come here. Now there's a specific spot that I have to stop in. Am I likely to be looking at the ground for my orange paint zone to know where to stop? No. So maybe, let's say I have a trigger freeze. Maybe I don't see my dot over here. It takes me a little bit longer to shoot that paper. Should I just keep moving? No, I need to stop here, right? How do I know where to stop? Very much like we talked about with the L drill this morning, I can use visual cues, right? To know where I am on the stage. You said the barrel. 100%, man. I know I've got to be looking down the left edge of this barrel to line up on that steel. So I'm just gonna know, hey, no matter what, even if, hey man, I have a mental glitch and I forget to do a direct transition, bam, and be starting the paper, and I kind of break down and I go like this, I'm like, oh yeah, shoot the paper, bam, bam. I just know as soon as I get to this barrel, stop. Because you're gonna overrun this position. And I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, ding, da 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 da, right? So a couple things we worked on today that have direct application there to the stage. That's kind of the movement piece. Any questions or other ideas or thoughts about movement, particularly on this course of fire? All that making sense? Okay. The last thing, right? I call this vision. And I'll kind of explain what I mean. I think a lot of top shooters, a really good way to think about stage flow is essentially, where am I going to look next? Where am I going to look next? That's really the order of events for the stage. Everything, as we've discovered today, is driven by vision. Obviously, the shooting is driven by vision. Target transitions are driven by vision. Even gun handling, like your draws and reloads, are driven by vision. And now we know that your movement is driven by vision, right? Where you look to start your entries, where you kind of cue yourself for your direction of travel for shooting on the move. All of this is visual cues, which is really going to determine your actions on the stage, right? So once I've planned out exactly what I want to do on the stage, a really good thing to think about is, where should I look on the stage to cue all of those actions? Where am I going to look next? As an example, I come in my first position here. I'm now going to exit, right? Where should I snap my vision to right now? It's probably a really good idea to have a specific plan. Where am I going to look? Do I just look at the targets? Where do I look? Where do I want to start shooting? That's going to cue my action. It's going to cue my entry. Where do I want that entry to really start? I'm going to pick a spot on the ground. Don't use my line necessarily. That was just kind of a prop, right? But everybody's going to, I would recommend you reverse plan it and figure out where you want to start shooting that entry, right? You're going to pick a spot. And I would look to that spot on the ground. As I come off of the target, I'm going to look to that spot, right? And then as I come in, I'm getting the gun up and I'm going in, right? I'm exiting now the shooting area. Where do I look now? To that plant step, that plant spot on the ground to cue my entry, right? I'm really programming in the spots that I'm going to look at. I may also want to really emphasize the speed of the vision in a couple specific contexts, right? If it's a really wide transition, whether it's a gun transition or a vision transition, as an example, when I come off of this target, like if I'm kind of lazy with the vision, I'll kind of do this. I'll go da da da, and I'll kind of be like, and I'm already here, and I haven't even looked over here yet, right? So I may want to program in, hey, as soon as the trigger breaks on this last target, I'm going to go ahead and snap my vision, bam, to that spot on the ground and really lock in, right? So I'm going to program in some visual aggression, maybe even some head speed aggression on that kind of a transition. Someone mentioned this morning, what about attack control transitions? Again, attack control is an exercise that really helps you push the aggression there. I wouldn't take that cadence idea onto a stage, but I might see, as an example, on a distinct control, to attack transition. Maybe I'm coming onto a difficult piece of steel, and then I'm transitioning to a really close, aggressive, open target. Guess what, man? I just know ahead of time if I'm sloppy on the steel, and I mean, sitting there waiting to make sure I hit it, that I'm probably going to kind of carry some of that carefulness onto my attack target. I'm going to be like, ding, yep, dot, dot, and I'm going to be way less aggressive on that than I could be, right? So maybe I'll program in not how I want it to sound, but hey, man, first of all, stop the dot on the steel, confirmation 3, and then explode the vision over to that close attack target, be really aggressive with that, and definitely use confirmation 1, right? So I'm going to be aggressive with the vision there. Do we see any really good examples of control attack transitions on this stage? Yeah, but I'm transitioning from that steel to what? I'm basically breaking the gun down and kind of cueing a movement into probably a confirmation 2 target. Yes. Okay. Classic example. Does everybody agree that mini popper between those two barrels is a control target? Yeah. Who had makeups on it? Quite a couple of us this morning, right? I'm gonna cue, hey man, stop the dot on the steel, have my trigger prepped, send a first round impact on that thing, and then as soon as I know I send that thing, bam! I can explode my vision and be aggressive with that gun transition down to that open paper if that's the target that I'm going to, right? So I might kind of program in some visual aggression there. So that's what I kind of mean by that last spot, the vision, right? It's just kind of a summary of all the things we've talked about already, but those are all going to be driven by vision, and I'm going to really program in what exactly do I want to be doing with the eyes as I go onto the stage. Stage planning. Hopefully that makes sense and gives you guys a better roadmap for how to really approach stages and not only come up with a good plan, but then really optimize that plan, right? Really make sure that you're kind of eking every bit of performance out of that plan you possibly can. People will say stage planning doesn't matter. And what they mean by that is, on certain stages, there might be 2 or 3 plans in terms of like what order you shoot certain arrays or what position you go to first or whatever. In some cases, on certain stages, you might have, 2 different start positions you're allowed to use, and it really doesn't matter which one you use. Got it. But stage planning does matter if what you mean by that is optimizing every single part of your stage performance. Of course, that matters a crap ton. Super, super important. And then hopefully we've started to understand, we didn't spend a ton of time on it, but kind of the process of using visualization and memorization to start programming all of this in and actually having a chance of executing it on the stage. That process is key. We also started to talk about how your training is key. I think your ability to memorize and program and then execute plans is a muscle that you grow and develop just like all the other shooting skills if this is something that you actually want to be good at. In other words, people ask me all the time, hey man, how do I just get better at stage execution? I feel like I'm shooting pretty good, doing my little drills and stuff on the range, but then I go to a match and I kind of fall apart on these big courses of fire. I'm like, well, okay, if you want to be better at USPSA style stages, how often in your training are you shooting courses of fire that are as long, as complex, and as difficult as your average stage? And the answer is never. Never. It's like, okay, well, Art, what are you training for then? Why are you doing stuff in training that's way simpler and easier than the challenge you're actually trying to train for? Right? This doesn't make any sense. And you say, well, I can't build this in my training, bay. And what I'm going for our practice day. Well, of course. Here's the thing, though. What's the point of all these props? All these walls are me just forcing you to do stuff. Right? The wall is me saying, hey, you have to go there to shoot those 2 targets. In training, I don't need the wall. I can create a rule. And I say, hey, I have to go there to shoot those 2 targets with no props. Right? So that's thing number 1. You can create these challenges for yourself with way fewer resources. All the way down to this. Imagine if I have 5 target stands. And I throw up 5 targets across the back berm. Right? And maybe I put 2 paper on each of them. So I have a total of 10 targets as an example. And maybe half of them are partials and half of them are paper. And then I take 6 cones. And I throw out 6 cones in the middle of my field, different places. And I take the back of a target there, and I random number generator. 3 targets I'm going to shoot from each cone. Target position 1, I'm going to shoot target 1, 2, and 3. Position 2, I'm going to shoot 5, 2, and 4. Position 3, I'm going to shoot 6, 1, and 7. I can shoot the same target from more than one spot if I need to, right? It doesn't have to be in order that makes sense. I'm just giving myself a unique challenge. Tell you right now, that random number generator stage I just created for myself is way more difficult to memorize than your average stage plan, where most of the time you run to a spot and shoot everything you can see. Right? So now, if I'm very used to crushing that style of challenge, how easy is my stage going to feel when I show up on Saturday? Right? And by the way, as soon as I get done shooting that plan once, if I change it, create a new plan, memorize that, execute that, and then immediately change it again and memorize and execute that, how good am I going to be at changing my plan when I need to? Right? So all of these are again, muscles and skills we can train and develop, just like the shooting hard skills as well. So we can kind of work on all that stuff. Last thing I'm going to talk about really quickly before we get to the stage, for sake of time, is kind of your make-ready process really quickly. You look at top shooters again, everyone's make-ready process is not going to be exactly the same. It's not going to occur in exactly the same order. There are some key ingredients that are found very, very commonly that I want to mention you to, that I would at least consider making a part of your process. First of all, if you're not aware, the rules have kind of changed. You used to be able to, on your make-ready command, take at least one step into the shooting area. You are no longer allowed to do that without previous permission from the range officer, right? So unless you ask permission, you can't take a step. You can move 1 foot if you want to, if that makes sense. But as soon as you move both feet, that is considered a step, and that would be, well, it's actually unclear if there's like a procedural or whatever, but you're not supposed to do it, right? So we generally don't do it. So now we're just kind of static. For me, on the make ready command, I'll typically take whatever the first action is, though. I like to do it at full speed. So if it's a draw, if it's an unloaded start, whatever it is, I will go ahead and do that at full speed. Some people suggest you should never do that because if you screw it up, then you're going to wreck your confidence. And it's like, well, if your confidence is that fragile, maybe you will. What I am exploring is, hey, guess what? I know how to draw the gun. I know how to do an unloaded start. Is there anything unique about this position that might require me to change my process, right? So as an example, in this case, I'm turned this way, right? Does this change the way my hand is approaching to the gun in a way that might change my index at all or whatever, right? And if I discover that it does, hey man, because of the way my hips are turned or whatever, I'm grabbing the gun a little bit off. I'm like, oh, cool. I found that. I need to change my wrist angle a little bit. And now I'm super, super confident that when the gun comes out of the holster, I know my grip is going to be right, right? So I'm simply identifying if there's anything unique about this position that would require me to change my process for that first action. And if anything, to me, that should help boost my confidence, not really destroy it. So I'll draw the gun to the first target. What I'm now going to do is check my dot brightness and sort of condition against all the lighting conditions that are available on the stage. So if I've got targets that are in a little bit of a shade spot, like this one right here, you notice how the face of this target behind the barrel is super dark versus my targets over here that are in direct sunlight. My dot might kind of appear different on those targets. So I'll kind of check it if I can, see what it looks like over here, see what it looks like over here, make sure it's at least at a usable brightness, hopefully, for all the lighting conditions on the stage. I'll generally pan it across the stage as well, just checking for, is there any weird lighting conditions, a sun over a berm or something that's going to create, some dot refraction or bounce or any kind of issues there that I have to deal with. Quick side note on that, if you do discover that's an issue, number one, anecdotally, but I've seen it so many times now I feel confident saying it, almost universally across the brands, the smaller MOA dot you use, the less problem you have with that dot refraction issue. Like the 1 MOA SRO specifically is light years better than like a 5 MOA SRO shooting into the sun. Just something I've noticed, like it or hate it, I think that's pretty much factual. Additionally, one tool you can use if you do struggle with that in your shooting, I think you've got one on your gun right now. The snap-on cover on the front of the optics, right? Stonebridge Gunworks is an example of a company that makes that. Is that what you're using, Stonebridge? I'm not even sure, but it's a little snap-on plastic cover that occludes the front of your optic. Great tool for training target focus. If you got questions about that, let me know. But it also kind of solves the problem of the sun coming through your lens, hitting your emitter and refracting onto your lens. So if I was to get into my start position at a major match, quite often I'll have one of those snap-on covers in my dump pouch in case I need it. If I get to my start position and I draw the gun and I go, yep, it's good over here, but when I go over there, holy moly, I've got 3 dots over there, right? I may just go ahead and snap that cover on, and now I'm pretty much guaranteed to have good dot brightness against all lighting conditions that are available on the stage. So I'll check my dot brightness against all lighting conditions. And then, of course, go ahead and load the gun and holster. Until you're ready, it's a super good idea if you're new to stages, right? The way to let the RO know that you're not ready yet is just leave your hand on the gun, right? Obviously, I'm not in the start position yet, so he's not going to say, are you ready? Because clearly, I'm not ready, right? So I'm going to leave my hand on that gun. And here's a last chance opportunity to get one more pass at visualizing your stage. Visualizing your stage, right? Now, obviously, with all of this, everyone's waiting on you, right? So I'm gonna be respectful. I'm not gonna take super long, but at kind of high speed, I will just mentally go through the stage and make sure all that gun comes back to the holster and they go, okay. And what am I doing? I'm checking my plan, but I'm looking at the targets while I do that. What is that not testing? My memory, because I'm looking at it, right? So if I, don't remember a target orientation or how a partial's set up or whatever, I'm not really discovering that as a part of my last second visualization. So for me, I'm going to get in this position and I'll either close my eyes, just look down. I'm going to go, okay, step in, open target, back out, 2 steps, open target, leaning X in the head box, straight into the reload, come into the attack target, a little bit of a lean around the nose shoot to the far target, 2 steps on the paper, stop for steal, aggressive transition, left paper, right paper, steel paper, head box, around the wall, last paper, cool, got it, I'm good to go. Now, before I actually signal that I'm ready, what should I do with my vision? Where should I be looking when I'm ready to start the stage?
Either at the target or the spot you're going.
Yeah, basically 2 options, right? So if there is something extremely specific that I need to do with my first step, i.e., let's imagine the start position is more like this, and I know, man, I have got to get my toe like on that nail or the target's not actually available. Might I look to that spot to kind of cue where my foot's going to go, and then on the beep, step and draw as my vision shifts to the target? Yes. That's a kind of a rare situation, though. So barring that, I'm highly likely to be looking at the first target. I'm sure some of us have really discovered, if you didn't know it already, how crucial not only target focus is, but sort of a precision target focus and looking to a specific spot on targets is for your shooting over the last couple days, right? How many of you do you think ever shot the stage and didn't pick a specific spot on the target with your vision while you were shooting it, either this morning or yesterday? I would assume everyone did that at least once throughout the stage. If there's one target where you have absolutely no excuse for that being the case, it is the first target. Why? Because in my start position, I can literally lock my eyes into that letter A on that first target and kind of stare a hole in it, particularly if it's if I can actually see it, right? Hopefully, and if it's a see-through vision barrier or whatever, hopefully I can lock my eyes into it and I can just draw straight to where my eyes are looking without my eyes getting pulled anywhere, right? Additionally, if you start with a really good hard target precision small spot focus, this is a really good subconscious cue to do that same thing for the remainder of the stage, right? If you don't start that way, if I start here, and then on the beep I go, and I kind of vaguely look at the target somewhere, I'm probably going to vaguely look at the rest of them also, right? So starting with that really good hard target focus on the specific spot on your target for that in that start position would be highly recommended. So I'm going to get my start position, gun goes in, visualize, look to that first spot as much as I can, and now I'm ready to go, right? So that would be kind of my make ready routine. Again, yours does not have to look exactly like that. Those are just some ingredients that I include as a part of my process that I would consider, working into yours. Whatever process you build, my recommendation would be try to come up with a process that as closely as possible works the same way every single time. You want to be highly focused. You don't want to be distracting yourself or problem solving or thinking through things as a part of your make ready. As an example, a lot of us for that first mag will quote unquote Barney around. right? We'll take a specific magazine, put it into the gun, rack around, and then I'll grab the actual magazine I'm going to use for the stage and swap it in so that I have a +1 in the chamber, right? An extra round in that chamber as I go to start the stage. Do I need to do that on this stage where I'm only going to shoot 10 rounds before reloading? I do not. Would I? Absolutely. Why? Because I do it every single time. Right? I'm not, so ideally, especially at a match, I don't think I did it this morning because I only had 2 mags, if I recall. So I had to change it a little bit, but at a match, like I'm very specifically going to get in a groove and to the best of my ability, use the exact same process on the stage every single time. So if you Barney around as a part of your routine, I'm going to Barney around every single time, whether I need to or not, and just try to have that super consistent. All that makes sense. Questions on that? Okay, very good. Let's do this. It is 4:36. I know we talked about what time we wanted to be done early. If we run it twice, I'm hoping we could get through in about an hour if we hustle. Everybody good if we're done by about 5:45 or so? Yes, 6 at the latest. Okay, very good. We'll plan on running through two rounds here really quick then. Here's what we'll do. The first rep will be kind of your warm-up, right? You can try some stuff, kind of go through, hit that process, try some things out, test your plan, make sure you've got it down. The second run will be for all the marbles. We got a couple giveaways. We got a howitzer gift card and stuff for the best hit factor on the final run of the stage to put a little bit of pressure there, right? Let's take 4 minutes until 4:40. Take a couple minutes just to walk through the stage. Make sure you got your plan down, and then we'll get together and we'll run it. Let me say this really quickly. Again, what we talked about earlier about some of the like the B class mafia advice you'll hear sometimes. What's one of the classic lines, man? Reshoots never go well, right? Occasionally in the sport, you will have a situation where you have to reshoot the stage, right? Either somebody didn't reset the steel, or, a swinger didn't activate, or a target wasn't pasted and they couldn't determine the proper score, whatever it is, you got to reshoot the stage. And what does everyone love to tell you? Oh, reshoots never go well. And if it's optional, you should never select a reshoot. Well, why though? How does that make sense? You don't want a practice run? You don't want to get a really good feel for the stage before you have to shoot it for score? Makes no sense to me. I love reshoots. I will take a reshoot any day of the week. What is the problem? Why do they always go bad? Again, I think it's the plate rack phenomenon. So what happens? If your first run went pretty well, what do you think to yourself? I can probably do that a little bit faster. All right? And you try to send it just that little bit more than you did on the first run. Don't do that. Don't do that. Here's how I would approach a reshoot like you have the opportunity to do right now. Anything that went well on the first run, don't change a dang thing. Do it exactly the same way again. If something didn't go well, okay, now maybe I can change something. Hey, man, I tried to do a leaning exit on that head box and I shot a mic over the top. Okay, maybe I'm going to stand still and shoot that a little bit more carefully. Hey, man, I was in the wrong position in the corner up here, and I tagged that no shoot, and that hurt my score a lot. I'm going to make sure I land in the right spot up there, and I'm going to confirmation 3 it, park that dot in the middle. Maybe I'll even aim a little bit further away from the A zone if I'm struggling with that. I'm going to really prep my trigger, make sure I get 2 hits, and kind of avoid that no shoot a little bit better. Hey, man, I forgot this target and had to come back for it. I'm going to really program in, make sure I hit that spot. Right, I'll fix the issues that occurred. Whatever went well, try your best. Exact same way. Don't change anything. Make sense? I'm going to make a new scoreboard really quick. Let's take like 2 minutes. You have one more chance to walk through if you want to change something in your run, and then we'll do the final run for all the beans.
All right, y'all, that's what I've got for you from 2 days of class at Level Up Pistol. The one part that kind of got cut out is our debrief or wrap up at the end. Apparently my camera battery was dead at the end of day 2, and we kind of missed that. I wish you guys had gotten that piece. But the main thing I'll say about it to kind of replace that just really quickly is this. Again, like we started off in the very beginning, my goal for the end of class is to give you as much homework as possible. And so this class is really designed not only to pack as much information and learning into 2 days as we can, but also it's really built as a training plan. So if you've just gotten done watching both of these videos and you're not really sure where to start in your training, start with the very first thing we started with on day 1. We started with, how do I press the trigger without moving the gun? And the bottom line is, if you can't do that, you're not going to be able to train recoil control. You're not going to be able to train shooting on the move. Like, none of those things are going to work well either if we are missing that core foundation of I can't press the trigger without moving the gun. And then from there, again, we can move on to recoil control. And again, if your recoil control isn't very good, like your shooting the move isn't going to be very good, like your transitions aren't going to be very good. All of those things are going to suffer. So shooting really is kind of an iterative, layered approach, in the sense that you got to have a solid foundation, then you can add the next layer. You kind of have to mash that next layer a little bit before you add the next layer, and so forth. So if you, as you're building out a training plan and homework from watching this video, if you are, and I hope you are, start with step one. Work until you've got a decent mastery of that, add step two, right? And just kind of, I would go through layer by layer and approach things in exactly kind of the order that we did in class. And I think that'll be the best approach for you in your training. As always, if you've got questions or anything like that, feel free to drop those below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Maybe we'll see you at a level up class in the future.